Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome. Apologies for the slight delay with some technology holding us up this morning, but a very warm welcome to you all for joining us online for this Committee of the Regions online conference for More Women in Politics. To celebrate International Women's Day 2021 today, together we're going to reflect on women's participation in politics. And this event is part of an initiative by the Committee of the Regions to promote gender balance in local and regional politics, to raise awareness. And today we're going to be looking at the state of play, how gender parity can be enhanced and advanced, what added value women bring to the policy debate and to decision making. And we're also going to hear some really good practices from local, regional and EU level. My name is Sally Nishaw and I'm your moderator this morning. I'm a programme expert for URBACT and coordinator of the Gender Equal Cities Initiative. And I'm really delighted to be with you all to take us through this morning's session. I'm hoping we may be able to look at the programme, but maybe not. It seems there's a slight issue with the PowerPoint slides at the moment. So in terms of the programme today, without being able to see it on screen, we have 3 separate sessions. This morning, we're going to be online now until 11:15.
Yeah.
We're going to.
Okay.
Here we go. We have the slides without an echo, I think. Great. So if we're launching the slides now, you'll be able to see shortly the programme that I'm going to talk you through. If we could have slide 2, that would be great. So this morning, as I said, we're going to be here till 11:15.
Yeah, but I have to listen to her, otherwise.
I think we still need to turn the microphone off on the PC that has the presentation.
David, shut down.
Thank you. Still some problems with the PowerPoint, but let's carry on. This morning's session is going to last until 11:15. We're going to start with a political opening and a welcome from the President of the Committee of the Regions. Then after that, we go into session 1, which is called How to Enhance Gender Parity at Local and Regional Level. Then we'll take a break and come back this afternoon. You can use the same link to enter the meeting that you already have. The first session this afternoon will be from 2 to 3:15, and that's going to be called Are the Web and Social Media a Safe Place for Women Politicians?, with some inputs from politicians on that topic. And then the last session for the last 30 minutes of the day, between 3:15 and 3:45, is going to be about leading by example, with some women politicians showing how to act as role models, really important for other women to aspire to and to see people who are doing that job ahead of them. So that's the programme for today. Before we get started, I'm going to go through some housekeeping rules. This is the Interactio platform, which maybe some of you are familiar with. First of all, we'd like you to keep your mics muted, and we will actually mute your mics for you if need be, and that's to avoid any background noise going on during the conference. Then, just to let you know, this event is actually being recorded and web streamed. We do have interpretation, so we have immediate translation in English, French, German, Spanish, Italian, and Polish. And you are welcome to listen in any of those languages throughout the morning. The way you do that is on this platform, you'll see at the top bar, the black bar at the top, there's a loudspeaker icon that says floor in green. If you click on that, you'll see the drop-down menu of the languages that you can listen into. So please, it may be worth setting that now. If you want to listen in one of those languages, put the setting on that now through the floor button at the top. Most speakers will speak in English, but some will not. So it might be worth you tuning into that immediately, or you can do it as you go through that floor button. We have on the right-hand side of the panel, as you can see, as usual with all of these platforms, a chat bar. So please do use the chat. It would be great if you could actually say hello, tell us where you're tuning in from this morning, which region or which city, and what your position is in relation to gender equality or in relation to politics. And that chat bar, we really would like you to share your ideas and your questions, share links to interesting reports or information. That's the way that we can really have an interactive session and listen to you and your reactions to the speakers this morning. And at various points in between speakers, we'll come back to the chat and see what you're saying and bring in your questions and comments from the chat. By the end of the session, we hope to be able to open the floor if we have enough time. And if we do that, you'll need to click on the raise hand icon in the user bar and wait until you're called. And when you speak, your button needs to go to blue. So we'll explain that later when we come to opening the floor with mics. And finally, we're also going to be using Slido this morning to do some polling. Slido, maybe a lot of you are familiar with. You can access the Slido platform either through your browser or through your phone. There'll be a link in the chat, and we'll also have a bar on the screen that you can use for your phone to get onto the Slido platform. And we'll do a little bit of polling to see where you're coming from, what your positions are, what your views are in relation to the content of this morning's session. So that's enough from me on introductions. I'd just like to say we're feeling very honoured today to have with us the President of the Committee of the Regions, Mr. Apostolos Tzitzikostas. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. President, and showing your support today for us on International Women's Day and your support for gender equality. So I'd like to invite you now to give us the opening address, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for giving me the floor this morning, dear members of the European Parliament, dear members of the European Committee of the Regions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is International Women's Day today, and we really need to speak truth openly. Today, out of our 1 million local and regional elected politicians, unfortunately, only 1/3 are women. And even fewer, less than 1 in 5, are the women who are mayors today. This represents a serious democratic deficit, a lack of diversity in our decision-making structures. The perspectives of women are essential for better informed, successful policymaking and for shaping societies to build back better after the pandemic. Therefore, improving gender parity, starting at the local and regional level, with the support of all political families as key partners, is a crucial step forward to more representative democracy. Dear friends, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed Europe and the world and left a lasting impact on how we live and how we work. Unfortunately, women have been disproportionately affected by this pandemic. Women have been at greater risk for exposure to the virus as health and care workers, and their employment has been hit worse than men's, with potential long-term impacts on pay and career. The lockdowns have widened existing gender divide in unpaid care work, led to an increase in domestic violence against women, and disrupted access to support services. In many ways, the pandemic has negatively impacted on gender equality. So I believe we all agree that identifying and tackling the barriers women face today in entering politics at the local level and the root causes related always to political campaigning, culture, funding and candidate selection, or care responsibilities, just to mention a few, is pivotal to changing the state of play. So to this end, we must put in place comprehensive and multifaceted strategies and engage with political parties and social partners while increasing at the same time the role of media and of social media. While at the same time, we need to combat the threat of hate speech. The problem of violence against elected female politicians and women in public life needs to be addressed, today more than ever, including online intimidation on social media, which influences women's ability to take part in politics and public life on an equal footing, We must establish a zero tolerance policy to sexism with clear channels for reporting sexual harassment. Dear friends, as President of the European Committee of the Regions, I acknowledge that its membership is still lagging behind in gender parity. As you may know, formally speaking, we are not our own masters when it comes to the nomination of our members. And we must try to change this strange rule in the near future. Officially speaking, this is the responsibility of the national associations and of the national governments coming from the 27 member states. Since almost all our 27 national delegations are led by men, we need to change this now. So I warmly call again and count on all our members and their political families to work together with the national associations and delegations representing the 27 member states in order to drastically improve the gender balance of the lists of members. This process, my dear friends, cannot wait any longer. It must be done after each regional and local election in every EU member state that generates new nominations of members to the European Committee of the Regions. Now, on the positive side, when it comes to the political decisions taken autonomously by our institution, in my mandate, we have reached gender parity for our commission chairs, and we also have political commitment to reach gender balance for rapporteurs over the current mandate. Also, I'm proud to say that half of the distinguished members of our new high-level group on European democracy that will be in the forefront of the discussion for the future of Europe are women. Moreover, I also continue to stress the importance of gender equality in our administration. And during the past year, we have already seen improvements as per number of women in our senior positions. And it is my political and personal engagement that we will continue this trend until the end of this political mandate. Dear ladies, on Women's Day, allow me to wish you all the best for your professional and personal life. And my message to you is that we all must and we will continue to work together. European, national, regional, and local institutions to make the equal participation of women and men in decision making a reality. It is essential to launch initiatives that empower women ahead of local and regional elections to overcome the discrimination and obstacles they encounter. It is vital to support women to stand as candidates in municipal and regional elections and for the political parties to show equal support to its candidates. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close today by saying that the European Committee of the Regions and all its political groups stand by all women aspiring to make a positive change in the local and regional communities and continue to encourage women to stand for elections. This is the only way forward. This is the only way for more resilient, more inclusive, more representative communities. And this is also the way forward for a sustainable post-pandemic recovery, a recovery for all. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to welcome our distinguished speakers for today, members of the European Parliament, locally elected politicians, regionally elected politicians, and expert panelists. I really look forward to hearing your views. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for those words of welcome and also the good wishes to all of us on International Women's Day. We're really happy that you're with us and you're going to stay with us a little to listen in, to start talking about how we tackle some of the challenges that you've just outlined there of improving women's participation in politics in the EU institutions and at local and regional levels. So thank you for that. So we're moving into the session now where we're going to spend the next 2 hours or so talking and thinking about how to enhance gender parity. And today we are going to have a great lineup of speakers, of women and a man, a couple of men involved here today, who are going to talk about their experiences, their knowledge, their passion for participation of women in public life. We're going to start with a 10-minute presentation on the Gender Index, which is part of the work of the European Institute for Gender Equality, with a specific focus on the power domain, which is about political life. And then we're going to hear 7 different stories or testimonies from politicians working at different levels and in different parts of the European Union. And we also want to hear from you. We want to hear from you in the chat. Please tell us, people have already started introducing themselves, which is fantastic. Please tell us who you are, where you're tuning in from, and share your greetings, which many of you are doing already. And we'll bring those comments and chats back in when we can. For those who are just joining, maybe a reminder about some of the housekeeping. You can choose the language in which you listen to this session by clicking on the button at the top called Floor. We have interpretation into a number of different languages, so you can choose what you listen in. And as I said, use the chat bar on the right-hand side, and maybe later on we'll be using polls on the right-hand side as well. So before launching into our, there we go, there's the title of this session, How to Enhance Gender Parity at Local and Regional Political Level. Perhaps we could have the slide with the speakers so people can see who is coming up. That would be great. The next slide, please. And you can see the lineup that we have ahead of us in the next hour or so. But before we launch into those speakers, we're going to actually see if we can do a poll to start with, to see where you're tuning in from and what the situation is in relation to gender equality and gender parity in your city and region. So could we have on screen perhaps, there are the speakers, that's great. Sorry, we're lagging a little bit here. There you can see the great speakers we have coming up. So please stay on board for the next hour and a half so you can listen to each and every one of those. That'll be going to be a really interesting morning with very different perspectives. But now we're going to launch a Slido poll, hopefully. Let's see if we can launch it on screen and maybe put into the chat, my colleagues, the Slido link. We need to go onto Slido platform, which is slido.com. Can we have that on screen, perhaps? Slido.com. Natalie, thank you. There it is in the chat bar. And once you get onto Slido.com, you need to use a code for this meeting. And the code is COR Women's Day. I think, could we have the code in the chat bar as well, please, if we don't have it on screen? And once you get onto Slido, if we can maybe put on screen there's actually a barcode that you can use to get directly onto the right page of Slido too. And see if we can manage to launch that poll. Perhaps my colleagues, there's the hashtag that you're going to need to use to get onto the right page in Slido. If you could do that now, either on your phone, a smartphone, or through a browser, if you go to slido.com, and the code is hashtag Women's Day COR. We're going to need to have it up on screen to be able to see the results of the poll. So it'd be good if my colleagues could let me know if that's going to work to do the polling. Perhaps we could get it up on screen, the Slido poll. Here we go. Great, we've got it. So there's the barcode. If you hover your phone over that barcode, you'll get onto slido.com. And the hashtag we need to use in the little bar where it asks you which is your meeting is hashtag Women's Day COR. If you go onto there, you'll find the first poll. Perhaps we could show that on screen as well, the first poll. The first poll, we're going to ask you to rate your city or region in relation to gender equality. So if you could think about, that's the second question, I think. There we go. There we go. There's the first question. We have 4 people answering already, which is great. So the first question is, how would you rate your city or region in relation to gender equality, where 1 is very low and 10 is very good? So We're going to hear in a minute from the European Institute of Gender Equality presentation how actually gender parity and gender equality varies a lot across the regions of the European Union. And I'm not exactly sure where everybody is coming from on board today. Certainly the registrations were coming from all over Europe, not just one region. So let's see how we think at the moment, how we would score gender equality in our regions and cities. It's great that so many of you have got onto the Slido platform. And I would say the results at the moment, with 42 people having voted, we're doing pretty average. Most cities and regions are scoring about 5 or 6, which is pretty average. The code, yes, the code is hashtag Women's Day COR. And you can see the hashtag is actually in the chat. Natalie has posted in the chat. So it's hashtag Women's Day COR. It's on the screen as well at the left-hand side, actually, slido.com, and then there's the code. So it sounds like most of you have got on there, which is great. 53 people voting. And the 26% have voted at 5, so that's pretty middling. And only 6% of people have given their city or region a 10. It'd be quite interesting to know what's going on in those cities and regions that are scoring so high here and doing so well. And that's something maybe we can talk about this morning as well. So that's great. Thank you for participating in that poll, where we see that there's work to be done, which I think is going to be reinforced in the messages from our speakers this morning. Work to be done. We need to score better than 5 in most cities and regions. We need to be getting up to that 5% who've scored 10. So perhaps we could go to the next poll now. The next question, the second question we're going to ask just before we launch into our first presentation is, what in your view are the main barriers to women in politics? And the way that you answer this question is, it's free text. You can type in, it's a word cloud, so you can type in what you think are the main barriers to women in politics. Oh, men in the middle there. And we're going to see what the consensus is. If the words get bigger in the middle, it means more people have said that word. I don't know if we can manage to go back to the Slido screen to see what people are saying are the main barriers for women. We've lost the results of that poll at the moment, but let's see. Hopefully we can get back to that and see what you think right at the beginning of this morning session. What are the barriers for women entering politics? Although maybe we're having difficulty getting back to that poll. The first one was great. It was really interesting to see how you were rating your own region or city in relation to gender parity. If we're not managing to get, maybe we'll come back to the results of that Slido poll later on if we're having difficulty getting that on screen, because that, whatever the results and whatever you think are the barriers, these are the things we're going to be talking about this morning and hearing about. So if you've got comments, please put them in the chat too. And in the, oh, there we go, we've got it back, great. So here we go. Self-confidence and men are the big 2 factors here we have in the middle. We've got 28 people who have voted so far or put in what they think. Really interesting other comments, perception of women, culture, things about the care burden, uneven care burden, family life, reconciliation with family life, opportunities, corruption, I can see there, which is quite interesting, stereotypes, old traditions, lacking in networks, lack of political will, lots of great ideas and views there about the barriers for women in politics. And I think we're going to be getting echoes of these as we hear from our speakers this morning. We can see being taken seriously, patriarchy, hostile environments. This is a fantastically rich word cloud that you're doing for us here. So thank you so much for putting your ideas in there. And we want to continue with this. We'll do some polls later on as well. And we'll also ask you to continue to put these kind of ideas and comments into the chat bar. And I'm sure our speakers are looking at this and finding things that they can maybe pick up on as well during their interventions throughout the morning. So thank you so much for that. We'll take a picture of that and can maybe come back to it as well. But in the meantime now, I'm going to actually pass over to our first formal intervention this morning. I'm very happy to have with us Ligia Nobrega, who is from the Research and Statistics team at the European Institute for Gender Equality. Ligia is going to talk us through one part in particular of the Gender Index, which is produced by the Institute, the part that relates to the power domain. So Ligia is going to talk for about 10 minutes with some really good evidence base about what's going on with gender parity in the power domain across the European Union. Very happy that you're with us this morning, Ligia, and I'm going to hand the floor to you. I think you're going to share your slides with us too. So over to you.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Thank you, Ligia. Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to try to share my screen. I also see that you cannot see me, actually.
No, at the moment your camera's off. Maybe our tech team could help you there.
Okay.
And now we see you. That's great. We see you perfectly.
There's
Good
no
morning.
problem, I mean.
Greetings for International Women's Day. Whilst if you try and put your slides up, and I'll let you know when we can see them, if that's okay.
Yes. So
Great.
okay. So can you see?
Yes, it's coming up. Well done. We've got it. Thank you so much. So over to you.
Okay, great. Okay, so yes, I'm Ligia Nóbrega. I'm a gender expert at the European Institute for Gender Equality. I've been working there already for 10 years now. I started joining the Gender Equality Index team, which was launched for the first time in 2013. And here I am going to present the results from 2020, so the most updated ones. We are also responsible at AIGE for data collection on women and men in decision making. So I'm going also to present some of the main findings of this data collection, which was the basis for calculating a specific domain of the Gender Equality Index, which is the domain of power. Okay, this might seem a little bit complicated, but I'm going to explain throughout my presentation. The Gender Equality Index, as I said, so it is a tool actually to measure the progress of gender equality within the European Union, and it was developed by our institute, by AIGE. It covers a range of indicators in the domains of work, money, knowledge, time, power, and health. It also integrates two satellite domains, which are violence and intersecting inequalities. The indicators are closely linked to EU targets and international commitments, namely the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The EU score overall in the Gender Equality Index, as you can see from this chart, is 67.9 points out of 100. This is just 4 points higher than 10 years ago. So we are moving slowly at a snail pace. That's an average of 1 point every 2 years. We are afraid that at this rate, the EU still needs at least 60 years more to upgrade the gender equality situation. So the top performing of the index in the European Union is Sweden, and then closely followed by Denmark and France. What we can see also here is that the countries which need more focus for improvement, it's Greece, Hungary, and Romania, as they are at the bottom. So here we can see the domains of the Gender Equality Index, as I mentioned. So what is driving gender equality in the EU? Actually, it's the domain of power. That we have seen that even though the EU's overall score for power is the lowest of all domains, the domain of power increased by almost 12 points since 2010. And is responsible for about 2/3 of the total improvement of the index since 2010, since we started calculating. So the domain of power specifically takes into account the political power, economic power, and social also decision-making subdomains. So today, because it's the focus of the event, we will focus on the political power. In this chart, so we are going to start by looking into national parliaments. Overall, in the EU, we have nearly 33% of women in the national parliaments. Parliaments in Sweden, Finland, Spain, Belgium, France, and Denmark included at least 40% of each gender. So the gender balanced line. But those such Malta and Hungary here at the bottom had less than 20% of women members. So at the current rate of change, it will take more than 12 years to achieve this aimed gender balanced zone that you can see here amongst the members of national parliaments in all EU. So what we can see also from looking at the trend is that actually binding measures help. We can somehow see it here. It helped quite substantially to address the gender imbalance that member states face. We can see here that 11 member states have so far adopted legislation establishing minimum gender quotas in the lists of their candidates for national elections. The comparison between pre and post quota rates, when it is possible, shows evidence of a positive impact in most of the cases. At the start of the available time series that we have here from 2004, women accounted for 23.2% of the combined members of parliament in countries without quotas, and 17.3% in the two countries with active quota legislation. So they wanted to address the issue. This is Belgium and France. The countries with quotas started from a below average position, bearing in mind that the composition of the groups of countries with and without quotas changes through time as countries move from the no quota group to the quota group after adopting legislation. At the end of 2020, the quota group was actually in a much better position. So 34, almost 35% versus 30%. This means binding measures actually make an impact, as you can see here. So now we move a little bit, we unpack more and we go to regional assemblies. If we look at the share of women in regional assemblies across the European Union, they account for 34% of members. Just 1 in 5 of these assemblies is led by a woman. A figure that has hardly changed in the last 5 years. So from 21% in 2016. Regional assemblies include at least 40% of each member in 5 of the 19 member states in which there is this regional level endowed with powers for self-government. But, for example, in Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary, men occupy more than 4 out of every 5 seats. and what is happening throughout the hierarchy. So here we can see large country differences in the share of women among the regional executives. So the proportion of women among members of executive bodies of regional authorities is very much the same as in regional assemblies. Women comprise nearly 35%, but the share of women amongst their presidents is actually much lower, only 50%. Amongst the 14 member states in which regional authorities have this distinct executive body, women account for at least 40% of the members in 7 member states, but less than a fifth in Greece, Czech Republic, and Croatia. So let's take a quick look at the trends. The rate of change at the regional level is actually extremely slow, almost horizontal here. The share of women in regional assemblies has improved by just 4.5 percentage points since 2005. Whilst the rate of change among regional executives is slightly faster, an improvement of 7.5 over the same period since we started this data collection. Okay, so now let's take a look at is happening at the local level. As regards to the local assemblies, so women actually account for 34% of members and only 17% of mayors or council leaders. The most gender balanced local assemblies we can see from this chart are found in Sweden, France, and Spain, with Belgium and Finland going close behind. In contrast, so the local assemblies in Greece, Cyprus, and Romania comprised more than 80% of men and less than 20% of women. So, last but not least, the rate also that of change within these particular indicators. In nearly a decade since data were first collected regarding local mayors, in 2011, the share of women amongst members and leaders of local assemblies has hardly increased. The rate of change at local level is therefore also very slow. Politics, as we started by the speech opening this event, remain still overwhelmingly male dominated, so it's still the domain of men. The change is very slow and definitely not sufficient. We are facing this crisis with the pandemic COVID-19. The women's absence in the political decision making is having a direct impact also on people's lives. So it is of utmost importance to ensure that women are taken to the debate, that they are at the table, not only in the front line as health carers, but also where the decisions are taken, where COVID-19 emergency and recovery plans are and will be going to be discussed. And that's all from my side. Very pleased to be here to participate in the event, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that you might have.
Ligia, thank you so much for that really comprehensive presentation. A lot of information there, a lot of data, which is great. And I think some key messages that will be repeated, one about regional disparity and another about snake's pace, as you called it. You know, how do we speed up this rate of change? And I think for all of us, the work that you do at the European Institute for Gender Equality is really important. It gives us an evidence base and the metrics that we need to share this information and understand what will make a difference going forward. So thank you so much for that presentation. Please do put any comments or questions for Ligia in the chat. We'll be watching the chat. Ligia could either answer directly in the chat or we'll pick up those questions as we go along. In particular, does that resonate for you, depending on which region you're coming from? And what suggestions do you have for how we increase that rate of change? So thank you so much again, Ligia. And we're going to move forward now to the next part of the session, which is to have 7 inputs of 5 minutes each from Committee of the Regions members and EU-level politicians who are going to talk about actions that they're taking at on the ground level to facilitate women's participation. So I'm really excited to hear these different perspectives from different members and different politicians at different levels. I just want to say, first of all, to all of our speakers coming up, you're very welcome. We're really happy to have you here. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say, but I'm going to ask you really to stick to the 5 minutes each, or we could run out of time with this session. And I will actually come up on screen when it gets to starting to run over to let you know. It's a little nudge to say it's time's up, because we also want to save time for the interaction in the chat and to have some more polls as well. So first up, I'm very happy to have with us Mrs. Concepcion Andreu Rodriguez, who is the Committee of the Regions Rapporteur on the opinion, A Union of Equality, Gender Equality Strategy 2020 to 2025. Very happy to have you on board. And first up, please, the floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. I'll just take my mask off. Thank you. Thank you, President, colleagues, and the public. I'll start by introducing myself. I know that the Committee of the Regions has been my home for the last year and a half, but maybe you don't know me. I'm Concha Andreu. I'm a woman, a daughter, a mother, a colleague, a biologist, a feminist, a socialist, and for the last year I've been president of the government of La Rioja. My colleagues of the Committee of the Regions appointed me as a rapporteur for the opinion Union in Equality 2020-25. And I took on that mandate of the committee on the basis of my personal convictions and defended that opinion and the recommendations within it. Today is the 8th of March, Day of the Working Woman. For me, leadership, because we're talking about women in leadership today, leadership is a right, not just for me, it's also in the Universal Declaration of Rights adopted by different representatives of regions of the world, and it says that in its Article 21 that anyone has the right to participate in the government of their country directly or via freely elected representatives. And that is the basis that we're starting from, which is very different from the place that we're in currently. We've heard the data from Jolanta, who's just given us the presentation. The report referred to gives us a good collection of data of women in local and regional government bodies. In Spain, 45% of the members of regional parliaments are women, which is very close to parity, but there are only 4 presidents of the autonomous communities, of which there are 17, so that's only 23%. And this is in the year 2021. I mean, if you look at the 131 autonomous presidents that we've had in Spain so far, only 11 of them have been women. In my region, we had to wait 38 years for a woman to become a leader of the regional government. Coming back to the opinion, there we talk about calling upon member states to organise and support initiatives to empower women with a view to local and regional elections. We need tools to overcome discrimination and the obstacles faced by women in these processes. The obstacles are real. Women have to face personal and public barriers. Our own value is questioned. We have to overcome party political inertia or the difficulty in correctly reconciling home and professional lives. And once we get into politics, we see that there is harassment and there is violence, mainly online, with the objective of belittling us and silencing us with fake news, campaigns of disinformation relating to gender and violence and targeting women. So we need to look at how that phenomenon is affecting our democracies. Thinking about the idea of co-responsibility of all administrations and public policy with a gender dimension which runs across ages and procedures in the decision-making process. Local, regional, national and European level bodies, including the Committee of the Regions, need to adopt codes of conduct which facilitate participation of women and men in the political process. The main aim here that we're talking about is gender parity. The Socialist Group of the Committee of the Regions has produced good results in that respect by focusing on the idea of parity. Already in 2012, Commissioner Reding has said, I don't like quotas, but I like what quotas achieve. I was in a video conference the other day. It was the first digital meeting entitled Because I Am a Scientist, or Why Am I a Scientist? And it was a day with women and girls, young women, and promoting their scientific careers. We're working to eliminate the barriers that are still preventing a lot of girls and young women to realize their dream of becoming scientists. Many women suffer invisibility, not just in sciences, but elsewhere as well. We see the imposition of traditional roles, and these are some of the causes that prevent women from joining sciences, although we're in a majority in the university. We subscribe 100% to what the women and girls said when they were listening to us in La Rioja. We, the women, have dedicated our lives to what brings us passion: science, education, medicine, politics, or public service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Andreu, for that very impassioned speech to start this session off for us. Thank you so much. I think there's some key themes that you're bringing out there, which we're going to talk about all day, including this afternoon, like online violence, the impact that's having on democratic processes, as well as women's ability to participate in politics, about quotas, which I'm sure we'll talk about this morning, and also about role models, as also for young women in non-traditional sectors and including science. So thank you so much for starting us off so well this morning, and greetings on International Women's Day to you in Spain. So now I'm going to ask our next speaker to take the floor. Our next speaker is the member of the European Parliament, Ms. Evin İnçer. You're very welcome, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say this morning. Could you come online? Hello there, how are you?
Hello, thank you very much. I'm fine. Apologize in advance, I'm at the airport, so that's why it looks
Thanks
like
for joining us from the airport. That's great. We can see the hangar behind you. So go ahead, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us. Oh, Looks like we may have lost connection in the airport Wi-Fi. Let's see if we can get Mrs. Inchir back.
So,
Yes. Okay, off you go.
I think
Thank
I'm
you.
back. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much for inviting me to this very important discussion. As I said, a member of the parliament from Sweden, from the Social Democrat Party, and a member of the S&D group in the European Parliament. I think for me, it's always important to not only talk about gender equality, but also talk about feminism. I know that for some groups it's very sensitive, but for me, feminism is about recognizing the situation as it is and wanting to do something against it. And when I'm talking about the situation as it is, I'm talking, of course, about the discrimination that's taking place, both when it comes to working life, but also when it comes to other areas of life and in society. And I also think that it's important to have intersectional perspective. We tend to talk about feminism as if all women are hit exactly by the structures, but we know at the same time that women of color, LGBTI women, and so on are double, even triple hit hard by the structures as they are today. So I think it's very important to have that perspective. And therefore also when I was the rapporteur for the opinion in one of my committees called the LIBE for the gender equality strategy that the Commission put forward last spring, I welcomed very much the intersectional perspective and approach in the gender.
It looks like the airport Wi-Fi might have gone down again. It's fantastic that, here we go. We lost you for a moment there, please.
So
please
it's
do
my own
continue.
fault. I think I'm pressing a button, which means that I'm disappearing. But I'll continue where I think I stopped at to be concrete on how to go forward. And many of the proposals and ideas have been mentioned. I will mention one of the proposals and ideas that my party actually used and has been successful, and that is the zipper system. It means every second man, every second woman, and also to have the intersectional perspective that I'm talking about. Men and women in all its diversity. But I also need to admit that when it comes to the intersectional perspective, until now, I haven't really seen any party or any country really being good at implementing the intersectional perspective. That includes my own party, I would like to stress. However, when it comes to the zipper system, already in 1994, the national, local, and regional elections, we started to implement it, and we have implemented in most of the bodies within the party, as well as local, regional, and national, and of course the European Parliament level. That also means that not only thinking about the zipper system in the sense of only having men leading the list, but also taking into account that there also needs to be women leading the list. And I think after so many years, after almost 3 decades of implementing the zipper system, we have seen quite successful quite good progress in the sense that in 2 of the 3 biggest cities, in Stockholm and in Malmö, we have women who are leading figures in local politics, as well as we also have leading women who are leading on a regional level. And the same also goes, I should say, in the European Parliament, where we have one of my colleagues, Helene Fritzon, who is former minister, but she's also leading our list to the European Parliament. So always having into account in the ZIP system also to not only being satisfied with having women on 2nd or 4th, because in those cases that you might get only one person into national, regional, local level, then you would most probably only have men. So that system also that perspective is important to have take into account. But furthermore, there are structures that also need to be tackled with in order to facilitate the possibilities for women to access politics. One is the violence that women are facing, especially women politicians and women of color and women with disability, women belonging to LGBTI community, and mostly it's seen on social medias with hate speech, with threats. So, and I remember myself when I first got a position within my municipality when I was 21 years old, a couple of years ago, so to say. But one of the first thing I got just a couple of days after I was elected was letters from far-right movements saying, you don't belong here, you should go back to your own country. Very sexist way of writing. Back then, it was not so much on social media as today, but it was more physical letters. But today we see more and more on online platforms as Facebook, as Instagram, as Twitter, that as soon as women of color, LGBTI women put something up, a lot of hate speech and violence or threats of violence follows. The second is then also to have a good welfare state to tackle structures in the sense that men are expected to have somebody at home who takes care of the children when they are doing politics, while women are expected to doing politics and taking care of the children at the same time, and maybe also having a full-time job, if not politics is the full-time job. So having a welfare state, I think, that provides the possibility for men and women to divide the parental leave is important, and also, of course, the right to good and quality daycare and school for children. So that's a few of the proposals that I think are important to address and to take with us to make sure that more women both have the or lower the barrier so that women can access politics, but also not only access, when they have access, to gain real power within the parties and not only be used as activists, but also real power makers. And once again, thank you very much for the invitation. And I really believe that the gender equal, a feminist Europe is possible, but in the end, it is about political will. And if political will is there, the change will also follow.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for joining us and giving us those actually really practical insights and talking from your own experience of what it's been like for you entering into politics. It's really valuable for us to hear that directly. And also for raising the issue of intersectionality, that we need to also take into account these factors of age, of race, of disability, of sexuality, that not all women are the same, and there are more difficulties for some women than others to enter into politics and in general in terms of their lived experience. So thank you so much. Also, I think from Sweden, we always look to Sweden, me as a feminist, you look to Sweden and think we have a proof of concept. We have a leading light sometimes with the way that the Swedish feminist system and the way that Sweden operates in terms of quotas and political parties. And we see progress there, which helps everybody, I think, to see that this can be done as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to move on quickly to the next speaker now. Safe journey onwards. The next speaker I'm going to invite to take the floor is Mr. Rafał Trzaskowski from Poland, who is a Committee of the Regions member and also President of the capital city of Warsaw. We're really happy to have you with us, especially to have a male member of the Committee of the Regions to support us today on International Women's Day. So please, the floor is yours.
Yes, it is a pleasure to be with you and to address you on this day. Well, I mean, we've talked about all the differences, when it comes to statistics. But of course, the thing is that we need to actually dig in deeper and take action. And not only on the 8th of March, because sometimes we just focus on women's rights just for a day within a year. And I think that this is in need of constant work, and we should be doing it every single day. We talked about a difference in salaries. And yes, we've seen that in Europe, there is a difference of 14%. In Poland, it is even bigger because it is 17%. And what we've tried to do on day one in the city hall, where I'm mayor, in the city hall of Warsaw, was to actually try to compare the salaries and to do everything that we can in order to fight the gap. And this is really important because when we compare the salaries, we cannot simply do it by, comparing it in the easiest possible way, but you need to compare the equal positions and also check the path career in the city hall in order to determine whether there is real discrimination or not. And of course, we've decided to do exactly that and to take steps to reduce it. In the city hall, it is 8%. So compared to what's happening on average in the European Union or in Poland, the gap is not that huge, but we've decided to address it and do as much as we can. Of course, when it comes to the participation of women in politics, I mean, we see different traditions in different countries. But we need to make progress so that women are actually represented in the highest possible positions. That's why 2 out of 4 deputy mayors are women in Warsaw, and also 3 additional members of the city executive board, coordinating directors, are women. A female CEO leads Warsaw's biggest city-owned company, water treatment and sewage company, and we've also have, for the first time in history, the transport executive board of Warsaw, which is now headed by a woman. And this is not only a question of parity, but this is that has very symbolic meaning, that in those posts of responsibility, we see women who actually are doing a fantastic job. And fortunately, in Poland, in my party at least, which is now in the opposition, we do see quite a change, because out of the parliamentary lists that my party submitted in the last elections, 43% of all the candidates were women. And we've decided to make sure that in the top positions on the list, we have as many women as possible in order to make sure that we have women leaders in responsible positions. But what we've done in Warsaw, we've tried to do more than that, because I started my campaign when I was running for the mayor of Warsaw by presenting a program for women, and we decided to do a real research. And it turned out that one of the biggest barriers when it comes to actually doing a career was connected with a problem of leaving kids at home. And of course, in a city like Warsaw, this is problematic. That's why we've decided to actually guarantee a better mix of family and professional life, so that women are not overburdened with family duties. And we've decided to introduce some fundamental changes. Within 1 year, we almost doubled the number of places in nurseries in Warsaw. And furthermore, nurseries care is now free of charge, and the city covers the costs. That was a pretty ambitious program, because what we've done, not only have we built nurseries in Warsaw in the past 2 years, but we've also decided to help entrepreneurs, many of them women entrepreneurs, to set up their own companies and create nurseries so that women can leave their kids in safe environment, paid by the city hall. And then, of course, it is much easier for them to realize their ambitions on the job, on the labor market. We've decided also to improve access to medical facilities for women, including for those with disabilities. The city, for example, finances the IVF program. We've decided to increase a possibility for access to doctors, which in Poland is quite important, because as you now know, we are led by a very, very conservative government, which decided to push the Constitutional Court, which unfortunately is not anymore independent, into passing a middle-aged interpretation of the abortion law. So the way in which we take care of women in our hospitals, because I'm responsible as a mayor of the city for 10 hospitals, is of crucial importance. We do have a problem with targeted social intervention, and that's why we've decided to invest in it, especially when it comes to emergency shelters for women, subsidized apartments for lone mothers, and we've launched a massive awareness campaign on the topic of family violence. And again, unfortunately, some of the non-governmental organizations that were supported by the previous Liberal governments now were cut from funding by the Conservatives. That's why it is of utmost importance that local government takes responsibility for actually these awareness campaigns for fighting with family violence, and we take that very, very seriously. We also do things of symbolic nature, and that's why I will ask today the City Council to rename several passages of the center of Warsaw after famous Polish female poets, because we think that, and also suffragists, because I think this is really important that we also introduce these symbolic measures in the life of the city. Let me conclude on a more personal note, since I'm not speaking only as a mayor of Warsaw, but also as a son, husband, and father. I sincerely believe that the actions taken at the city level, the level of cities, regions, and countries, and also the level of the European Union is very, very necessary, and in some cases overdue. But I really strongly believe that the change I was talking about has to actually start with us, men, because we need to rewrite the imprinted mentality, and we really need to look at the real problems. And we are the people from the local government are best suited for that, because we are not only about symbolism, we are not only about the 8th of March, but we are about concrete steps that actually can change the reality. And that's why what we did first, we talked to women, we did our research, and that's why we started with the nurseries, we started with fighting family violence, we started with subsidized apartments for lone women, we started with actually improving the access to health, because these were the three top things that women told us about. And of course, also the salary gap. Once for all, we have to change our narrow perspective, be more empathic and thoughtful, and we need to act every single day in the year, not only in the Women's Day. And that's what most of us, leaders of the local governments, are doing, because that's what our women tell us in our cities, that we need to take actions every day, and we are very much committed. Thank you very much. I think that we can do it together.
Thank you so much, and especially for that rallying call that this is about taking action every day. International Women's Day is an important moment, but we all need to take action every day. And I really liked your examples of those senior women in roles that are non-traditional roles in Warsaw, how important that is symbolically as well. The social infrastructure that makes life a lot easier for all families, for parents, for healthcare services, childcare services that enable participation in civic and political life. And also the symbolism of changing elements of your urban landscape, like road names, like street art, to reflect a more balanced view of the population. So thank you so much for joining us and for those comments. Thank you. I'm going to now just quickly ask my colleague Natalie if we have any comments in the chat or questions that we would like to report. Please keep putting your comments and questions in the chat. We can see that it's starting to liven up, and people giving examples of great examples, practical examples, but also maybe asking questions. Natalie, do we have anything to report from the chat?
Hello, good morning. Thanks for everyone for contributing in the chat. We have people coming from everywhere. We have someone from Istanbul, Turkey. We have someone from Albany. We also have Sandra Cecciarini, who is interested in knowing best practices of municipalities to foster gender equality in projects of decentralized cooperation. So if you have more information, you can contact her. We also have someone from Kenya who is working in women and democracy and governance. And we also have a comment saying that the party Die Linke in Germany came up with the system of having two different lists running parallelly to make sure that they have at least an equal number of men and women in the management or top senior positions. And then don't hesitate to continue putting your questions in the chat, and we will bring them up to the discussion.
Thanks, Natalie. That's great to hear. And it's really nice to hear how many people are joining us from around the world. Keep telling us who you are and what you do. And if you have any practical suggestions for advancing gender parity, we really want to hear them too. So let's just go to a quick poll before we go to our next speaker. Maybe we could get the poll on screen. It's on Slido again, the same slido.com with the same hashtag for the event. Could we get that up on screen, the next poll question, please? We're going to be asking you a question related to, in fact, the IGA presentation about quotas, to find out if you all have quotas at local and regional level in your own member state, your own region, your own area. We're interested to know how many people have got quotas in place. Could we get the slide on screen? Is that possible? If not, we'll maybe move on. So if you go to slido.com, same as before, hopefully you'll find the question there. We'll maybe get it on screen in a minute. Here we go. There's the on screen. So it's slido.com, hashtag Women's Day COR. So are there quotas established in your municipality or region? Yes, no, or don't know, because we've heard already how quotas do play a part in advancing the participation of women in political party, in their list system, in local level political roles and authority. So at the moment, it seems like there are in 45%, in the majority of municipalities and regions for the people on board, there are not quotas established. Or maybe it's going a bit neck and neck, and some people don't know. It's not obvious. Sometimes we don't know if there are quotas. If you're involved politically yourself, you're likely to know exactly how the system works. And we've heard from some of the speakers already some of the differences between the way that these kind of binding measures can work at party level, at political level, and at institutional level too. So it seems about fairly even at the moment, 44 to 37. Okay, good. So a pretty even split between 43% and 36% between yes and no of whether quotas are established. That's maybe something we could find out more about as we go on. But and we're getting more questions and comments in the chat, which is great. We'll pick those up shortly, no problem. We'll bring those back in. But right now, I'm going to ask our next speaker to take the floor. Thank you for participating in the poll. We'll come back with a poll later. But the next up is our next speaker, who is Mrs. Helen Rijkman. Helen is a Committee of the Regions member, and she's a Member of Parliament of Wallonia in Belgium. So, Helen, I hope you can take the floor now. I think you might be sharing some slides if you want to go ahead and share your screen and put your camera on, and we're looking forward to hearing from you about your experiences at local level. The floor is yours. Could we hear from Helen to see if she's okay, to see if she can manage to take the floor and put her slides on? I saw her earlier, so I'm pretty sure she is here.
Helen, please, if you can speak, if you can press on the speak button, and you have the floor. Thank you.
Here we go. Great. Hello, Hélène. The floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak French today, and I'll try to share my screen with you. You should be able to see it. Can you see my slide?
We do, yes.
Alors, je vais donc vous donner quelques expériences.
So I'm going to share the experiences of Wallonia, which is a Belgian region, and the experience of my party, the Greens, Ecolo, they're called. I'm able to speak today because I'm a local elected official in my local area, the commune, but I'm also a regional elected member, and so I am a senator in one of the federal government bodies. For me, there are essentially two mechanisms for having more women in politics. It's particularly important for all women, and has been since the Beijing conference. So that involves strengthening legislative mechanisms to guarantee equality. And the second thing I'll present to you is commitment on the part of the parties and their good practices to ensure equal room for women. So how can we create a legislative mechanism to guarantee equality? In Wallonia, we've got a decree, a law, and that ensures equality on the lists. That's the ZIP system that our Swedish colleague mentioned already. So we had to set up quota mechanisms, and at the start, they aimed for a quarter, then a third, and now it's 50-50. So we have a full ZIP system to ensure more equal representation of women. Another challenge is ensuring that equal rights in terms of strategic places, so the 2 or 3 first elected places, or the 2 or 3 first places on the list. So in Belgium, we have a voting system which is proportional, and that means we have a list system, and the order of the lists is very important. There's also a general vote for the list, where you have which is distributed among the first, second, and third on the list. So it's important to have a woman in one of these first 3 places on the list, because that guarantees that she'll have better results in a better election. We've had a major impact, because in the last 24 years, that's 1 generation, the percentage of women in the local government, local councils, has increased from 18.2% to 38.7% women. So that's a huge leap in a single generation. Some people think that's quick. I think it's still too slow, because it'll still be a few years before we get true equality. But it's still important. Wallonia has also imposed a guaranteed proportion of women in executive bodies. So we changed the decree to guarantee that you'd have at least a third of each gender in local governments and in government. That's important because, as several of you have said, previous speakers, in fact, have said, it's important to have role models. It's important to have more women in the bodies that manage the local governments and local authorities. So having at least a third of women in the local governments is something. In 2012, we had 12% of mayors were women, and in 2018, that's the next elections, we leapt up by 50%, so 18% of women, 18% of mayors were women in 2018, from 12 to 18%, but that's still too low. What we managed to achieve with our mechanism for representation in local and regional parliaments is to guarantee that in regional parliaments, 41% would be women. So it's 43% in Brussels and 47% in Flanders, which is the other region. Those are the other 2 regions in Brussels. In Belgium, and there weren't quotas. So that's a good figure. Then I wanted to talk about parties' commitment and their good practices and their commitment to ensuring that women could be in politics. In my party, it's very important. We need to be able to support women and guarantee that there is a place for them, and to support their investment in staying in politics at local, regional, and federal level. Earlier, we talked about codes of conduct. And I wondered to what extent that can be imposed. How can we make all parties adopt and respect those codes of conduct? Because parties need to be proactive in implementing that. So perhaps there's still some work to be done there. Our party worked on its internal regulations and its rules of procedure. and set up a series of training programs. So some details on that here. In the party's manifesto, feminism is the second point, I believe, of our values and commitments that the Greens want to put forward. We also ensure that the directors of the party are equal, that it be half women, half men. We're not quite there yet, but there is a group of women who are monitoring that and ensuring that the rules are applied. We also have procedures. We have a dual presidency at all levels. So we have two presidents of the party, a man and a woman. We have two presidents in regional assemblies and two in local assemblies even of our party. And so that's the rule that we maintain at all levels. One woman, one man. We ensure that in external bodies there is equality in terms of office, because if it's not equal, then it's not covered. We won't replace if there's not a woman, we won't replace that position in external bodies. We'll try to come up with in other measures, we try to make sure that we have alternate male and female speakers in our meetings. We need to make sure that we're stricter about it, because we need to make sure that if there's no woman who wants to take the floor, then we stop speaking. Meeting times are also an issue, because if we have meetings from 5 p.m. till 7 or 8 in the evening, there are a lot of problems with family life and reconciling work and family life. And so we have to make sure that our meeting times are adapted to that, because if we don't, it's difficult for women to get involved because they're putting their children to bed and getting them ready for bed. And so those are barriers that we can get around. Or, for example, the party can pay for babysitters for evening meetings. It was interesting to see that with COVID-19 and remote meetings, some positives have come out of the situation. Firstly, because women write more in chats and they express themselves more easily in chats than by taking the floor.
We're just running over time, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Et donc le deuxième.
The second important aspect is training. Training for elected members and party members. Training in empowerment, in taking the floor, in unraveling the structures in politics that prevent women from getting to the fore. And so what's important is to reinforce self-confidence through different mechanisms and organising a mentoring programme where elected women can accompany those who are younger and those who are starting out in politics so that they can get involved.
Hélène, for that comprehensive presentation. And I think that's really detailed information about how you're making it work in that system. So I think people in the chat, if you want to have more information about that, because that seems to me there are elements that could be transferred. They're very, very detailed ways of working to make sure, both legislatively and in practical terms, that gender parity is enforced. So thank you so much for that. And if people would like to know more, I think Hélène may be able to share that technical information. We'll certainly share the slides afterwards, because that's a really detailed account of how to do it at local level. So thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to call on our next speaker now, which is Alison Gilliland, who is a Committee of the Regions member and a City Councillor from Dublin, Ireland. So Alison, welcome. Happy International Women's Day, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sally, and happy International Women's Day to everyone out there listening, including our male colleagues who are our allies in this. Yeah, I am a member of Dublin City Council. I'm also an alternate member of the Committee of the Regions, and I sit permanently on the Civics Group. I'm a member of the Party of European Socialists, who have very, very strong gender equality policies when it comes to speaking and roles within the group. I'm also a full-time trade union official with a teachers' union here in Dublin. And I suppose that's one of the barriers that local councillors in Dublin have and across our country, is that most of us have to juggle a full-time job, family and the role of council. We have 31 local authorities with almost 1,000 local councillors. 25% of those are women. And it's not really increasing term on term. We do have gender quotas in Ireland, but those quotas are only for our national parliament, the Dáil, which requires parties to have 30% of their candidates to be women. And while in our last two elections, this has been in since 2012, our last two elections have seen more women than ever on as candidates, unfortunately, we're still only 22% of our national parliament are female. It's slightly better in our Seanad because I think once the parliament is elected, it's parliament members that select the Seanad, there's more consciousness of the lack of women in the lower house. So we do, and particularly my own party, the Labour Party, 3 out of the 4 members we elected to the Seanad were deliberately chosen as women because we're conscious of that. I suppose conscious of the role that women do bring, aside from being half of the population. I think our gender allows us to bring a real practicality to issues, particularly at local level. One of my colleagues, actually, Senator Ivana Bacik, did some research a couple of years ago on barriers to women in politics, and she highlighted the 5 C's. So childcare, cash, confidence, culture, and candidate selection. So we could say that the quotas sort of do address the candidate selection. There's actually a fine for parties who don't run the 30% of members in the Dáil. And while they're not enforced for local elections or Seanad elections, there is an awareness there. And I suppose in the media will speak about the number of female candidates different parties select. In Ireland, we don't have a universal childcare system, so that is one of the huge barriers. Childcare here is incredibly expensive. We would also have a lot of our meetings are very sporadic it could be during the day or they could be in the evening. So it's definitely a problem for women that are juggling work, childcare and a political role. Cash for campaigns is also an issue, and sometimes you're just left on your own. If you want to run, you need to have the money, and obviously that discriminates against women, particularly in the lower paid sectors, or may not have either the time or the money to do it. Confidence, and it was interesting on your Slido poll there that did arise a lot, and I suppose it's something that I very much struggled with early on. My first election was in 2014, and I was only selected 3 months before the actual election in May, and that was because one of our male candidates left the party. So I was very much thrown in at the deep end. And I do have 2 slides because one of the organisations that gave me that confidence were Women for Election, and I'll speak about those in a moment. The other C around culture, there is an awareness that we need more women in politics, but there's a real lack of wanting to do something about it in legislation. At local council level, we don't have a huge amount of power. It's national legislation that we depend on when it comes to childcare, or an interesting one at the moment that we're all advocating for is paid maternity leave for local councillors and indeed for our local national politicians. Our current Minister of Defence and is actually pregnant and going to give birth in May, and there's a big polemic at the moment is how she wants to take 6 months off. She's made that very, very clear. There is no facility for maternity leave, and according to our constitution and legislation, she would have to resign her position. So our governments are currently scrambling as to we can't allow this because it's going to be terribly embarrassing apart from anything else, but we have to accommodate this. So it'll be a really interesting test case for us all. Quotas have made a difference to the candidate selection. We've had more women running than ever, but we're just not getting women elected, 25% of our local authorities compared to the European average is still very much striving to get there. But at local level and indeed national level, we are making great changes. And I don't know if Paolo has my slides there. The first one is on an NGO called Women for Election. It was set up in 2012 and very much in line with the quota system that we organised to do something to encourage women and also to train women. I know our colleague there, Elaine, mentioned training. And I went through Women for Election myself, and I found it absolutely empowering and invigorating. One of the things I found when I was selected was everyone's telling you what to do and how to do it. Generally, they're men telling you what to do. And I did find it very intimidating because I am not a man and I don't do things the way men do things. And trying to find your own woman to woman with a politician. So Women for Election organise very specific training, and it's very, very practical. And they do that in the run up to all the elections. So it's about canvassing, it's about public speaking, it's about getting your message across, about social media, including how to protect yourself on social media. And they also do a lot of events where they feature females in politics and invite young women and any age of women. It's not just young women, but we need every age of women to come along, listen, ask those women about their experience. And I think that really helps others who might be thinking about running. Well, what's it like really? And I think women to women, we can be very practical, and we recognize the need in other women because we've probably had that need ourselves. So they very much do, they provide training, they provide awareness raising, they also do research. And last week they just recently published, or last week they published a paper with recommendations on what we need to do to improve the representation of women in politics. And that includes, as I mentioned, maternity leave, but it also includes remote voting for those instances and those days that you just, perhaps of family reasons, you can't be there to vote, and there's an important vote. And we've had issues. A colleague of mine had to come in from the hospital 6 days after having her baby to vote on a very important issue.
Alison, we'll need to wrap up a little now, if you could.
Thank you. The other thing we've done at local level is we've established a women's committee on Dublin City Council. It's the first time it's a formal committee. It's got secretarial support, it's got funding, and we're very much looking at three particular aspects. One is the economics of our own pay and conditions and maternity leave, childcare. The other is safety in the city for women. And we engaged our deputy city planner, who happens to be a woman, which is fantastic, to talk to us about planning and the layout of our city, lighting, for example, streets, through the lens of women's safety. And we've made a submission now as a committee to our development plan. And the other is just being a support to each other, networking with each other, because I don't think women do that in the same way or have the same opportunities. We established it back in November in the middle of COVID, but it's something that I think will really support all women on the council, and particularly women coming new into the council. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks so much, Alison, for that really interesting overview. I'm going to really remember from your presentation the 5 C's. I think that's a really clever communication from a piece of research about what those barriers are. They really stick in your mind, but also what you've talked about in terms of reconciliation with family life and some of the very practical issues, like even being able to vote when you have a small baby, which we have seen in various national and regional parliaments, women carrying babies, and how do we get over some of those difficulties. So thank you so much. And I'm sorry we couldn't share your slides, but we will share them afterwards on the platform. The slides will be up on the platform afterwards, so we'll make sure people have access to those. And if there are any other presentations or questions in the chat, please respond to them. We have a question from Laura Gonzalez in the chat that the interpretation is not working, but I wonder, Laura, if you go to the floor section at the top and do the scroll down menu, Hopefully you can find what you need there, and maybe my colleagues will help with the chat to help people make sure that they can access the right language. So thank you so much, Alison. I'm going to call on the next speaker now. We're going to take some questions at the end of all of the speakers. We have 2 more, actually. So the next speaker is Elizabeth Nebrada Villa, a Committee of the Regions member. Elizabeth, would you like to take the floor, please? The floor is yours. Can we have Elizabeth?
Yes.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning,
Nice to
everyone.
see you. The floor is yours.
Nice to see you too. Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. And thank you for having me here today, for the opportunity to share with you a few ideas and experiences on what we're doing in Catalonia to foster gender parity in the political sphere. I will try to be very brief and straight to the point because I know that we are a bit, we're running a bit behind schedule. And I should probably start with a word on our current context. A few weeks ago, we advanced 2 positions in the European Institute for Gender Equalities Index, ranking in the 7th position in Europe, 3.5 points over the EU 28 average. Of course, these things are encouraging, but there is still so much to do, especially when it comes to power distribution and political representation, which, according to the data published by the Catalan Women's Institute, remains our main weakness. We all can agree that passing laws is not enough to change reality, or at least not at the speed and depth we would like to. But it is a first step to change behaviors. Let me explain. In 2007, the Spanish electoral law was amended to add a new clause stating that men and women should be represented 60-40 in blocks of 5. So you go to vote, you pick the ballot, and what you see is a list of names where the first 5 names include 3 women and 2 men. The next 5 are 3 men and 2 women, and so on and so forth. Did that change things a lot? Well, according to data published today, women representation in the Catalan parliament rose by 7.5% after the amendment, but then it got stuck. From 2010 to 2017, not only did the figures stagnate, but they actually regressed. It was the change in society and people's minds and the new momentum gained by the feminist movement what explains the 9% increase that we experienced in the elections that were held only recently on the 14th of February, setting a new historical record of 47.4% of the seats being occupied by women in the new Catalan parliament. So it wasn't a law, the fact that women were able to access, or it wasn't because of the law that the fact that women were able to access positions of power, what made a difference. Having women in power is key, to have more women in power. It is like a virtuous circle. To the 47.4 attained at the parliament, I should add that at the local level, 44% of Catalonia's town and city councillors are women, and even though only 23% of mayors are women, they rule over 40% of the population. This is key. Just as it is key to have Jacinda Ardern ruling in New Zealand, or Sanna Marin in Finland, or Angela Merkel in Germany, or Ursula von der Leyen in the Commission, Kamala Harris in the States, for instance. All these women from Catalan towns to the Commission or the White House offer a spectrum of political role models for today's girls to grow into the leaders of the future. Let me share another example of positive change, not stemming directly from law. The 2006 Catalan statute, it's like our constitution, a small constitution, if you will, states that Catalonia's electoral law will establish the necessary criteria to ensure parity between men and women in electoral lists. Well, the thing is that we don't have a Catalan electoral law yet. However, that didn't stop my own party, for instance, from setting in its internal regulations the obligation to alternate a man and a woman in its ballots. And the thing is that although it was not compulsory for all the other parties, as it is for us, as I said, the same practice was in fact used by half of them, And that secured the historical representation in the 14th February elections that I explained before. If I may, I would like to mention a last example, which I believe illustrates the intersections between private and public life. In 2016, the Catalan Parliament became our first institution to adopt the so-called time reform. With it, some of the access barriers related to life-work balance were lifted, thus making a political career as member of the Catalan Parliament a more viable prospect for many women. The Parliament also promoted the research on violence against women in politics in order to have a better understanding of the recurrence, motivations, and impact of those violences on women's capacity to exercise power, on their resignation from politics, on their choices, letting opportunities go by to hold a position of power, and so on. I believe research like this is extremely necessary. After all, violence against women in politics is a human rights violation that curtails women's participation in politics and electoral processes. And yet, global, regional, and national data and comparable data on its prevalence or incidence is unavailable. Thus, advancing in the standardization of data collection on violence against women in politics is crucial and critical, for only through a transversal and comparative understanding of all the forces at play, we will be able to tackle and demolish all the barriers that prevent women from occupying the rightful place and central role in our societies. Research is vital, but research alone, of course, will not cut it. Knowledge is key, but action, real action, must be taken from politics for change to happen. This is why the Catalan government, which is likely to take office in the coming weeks after the elections, has pledged to create a new ministry for equality and feminisms, in plural, which will have to detect, analyze, and tear down all the structural, socioeconomic, institutional, and cultural barriers that half of the society are forced to face in order to achieve a very basic yet revolutionary idea that women have power over themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Very powerful and stirring words there for us. And I think it's really interesting you brought the word justice and the whole concept of justice into this. This is central. This is actually a right, a democratic right, and the right of women, as you say, to have control and power over their own lives and their environments, their cities and their regions. So thank you for that. And I love the optimism as well about you. You're quite right that we can see quite a lot of different role models now. Girls can see quite a lot of different types of women's leadership on the world stage, which is encouraging that they can aspire to be like. So thank you so much for that, and stay on board because we might have questions for you. So now I'm going to ask our final speaker to take the floor. Our final speaker in these interventions is Maxi Karl. Maxi Karl is a city councillor in Hanover in Germany, and she's also participating in the Committee of the Region's Young Elected Politicians Programme. Just to let you know, before Maxi gives us her views, that programme is actually open at the moment for applications, and I'll ask my colleagues to put some information in the chat. So if you're a young elected politician and you'd like to be part of that programme, please do get in touch, follow the links in the chat because the call is currently open. And Maxi, I know, is going to talk about quite a lot of things from her own experience, but maybe also she could say a couple of words about that programme. But the floor is yours, Maxi. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much for introducing me, Ms. Nisha. My name is Maxi Karl. I am a local politician at the City Council in Hanover. My party is the Social Democratic Party. And this last year, I took part in the Young Elected Politicians Program of the EU, which is a really nice way to getting connected together with other young elected politicians throughout Europe. But now let me start what we do locally to get gender equality on a political level. Unfortunately, in Germany, we do not have a parity law installed in Germany in the regions. There have been attempts to do so, but the regional courts ruled that the free right of nominating candidates for the parties is violated. That's why at the moment we don't have any law for parity, which is a pity. But we as Social Democrats always try to have turning tickets for candidates, so there always has to be women and men on the electoral list. What do we have here in Lower Saxony installed is a very interesting program, which corresponds a little bit to the program that Mrs. Gilliland talked about in Dublin. It's a mentoring program, and it's run in the region of Lower Saxony. And it's called Frauen macht Demokratie, which has a double meaning because it can either mean women make democracy or women power democracy. And I like that double meaning because that's essentially what making politics is, exercising power. So what is the program all about? It's a one-year program which starts 2 years before the local elections. It's financed by the Regional Ministry of Social Affairs, Health and Equal Opportunities. And basically it has 3 parts. It has a mentoring part, a training part, and a networking part for the mentors and mentees. At the beginning, there is an application of mentors and mentees. Afterwards, there's a matching process where mentors and mentees are put together according to their political affiliation. And once they agree to be a team throughout that mentoring program, the program starts. The mentoring part is all about the mentor trying to introduce you to local politics. He or she gives you insights by taking you to local meetings, to city council meetings, to political group meetings, to all meetings you want, and every event related to the mandate. But it also involves personal consultation, so you can ask every question you have to your mentor. I myself have been mentee and mentor. That's actually what got me involved into politics, and it has always been a pleasure to, on a low-key level, be able to ask questions, even so-called dumb questions, but there are no dumb questions, and it helps to just get a feeling for local politics. The second part of the mentoring program is the training part. A little bit similar also to what Mrs. Gilliland said. There are trainings to get a basic knowledge about the political system locally and to understand it, how it works. And there are always also trainings for soft skills. So, for example, to improve your rhetorical skills, like how to give a good speech, how to convince people, and how to work with social media as well. And so there was even a simulation of a council meeting where the mentees could try, do they like to be in group discussions and to try to get their political views transformed into an actually law made by the city council. That is actually a nice, easy way to getting involved into politics. And there's even a part where a self-assessment takes place. We have a booklet here, which says Wahlsiegplaner, which is an election victory planner, so-called. And there are questions which you can actually answer. And then at the end, you get to know your strengths, your capability, and make maybe some weaknesses as well. And then you you see where your weaknesses and strengths are and how you can improve them. So I like that training part as well. And at the end, there's also a networking part. We talked about women not being as good in networking, but actually this part helps us because throughout the mentoring program, there are various meetings where you meet other mentees, other mentors, where you can interview role models such as female mayors or other city council members. And so you can get a good impression what it is like to be a local candidate and a local politician. Yeah, that's an overview about the mentoring program. Last year, 825 participants have taken part. 443 female mentees, 382 mentors, and we hope to see them on the election lists because it's really fun to be actually a local politician and to try to create a better world locally. And of course, there are other things that need to be improved as well to make it easier for women to take part in politics, such as childcare and compensation for childcare and a leave of absence during meetings from a job, compensation for loss of earnings during that time. In Hanover, we have installed all these measures to make it easier for women. However, as said before, council meeting times are sometimes a little bit hard to really make a good share of working in your profession and being a local member of parliament. So that's an overview of what we do here in Hanover, and I hope that can show a best practice for others.
Thank you so much, Max. Yeah, it certainly does. And your enthusiasm for making the world a better place and your city a better place is fantastic to see. And we put in the chat the link to the mentoring system that Maxi has just talked about. That's a fantastic advertisement for you, for Hanover, for the whole, and fantastic one for the Young Elected Politicians Programme too. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, Maxi.
Thank you.
So we have like 4 minutes to wrap up now, not long. It's been such an interesting morning, and thank you so much for all those interventions and also for your comments and questions in the chat. I'm going to go over to Natalie in 2 ticks to ask, I think we've got time for one of the questions that came in the chat. I also wanted to pick up some of the other comments in the chat. For instance, we had a link to a very good network on refugee and migrant women. Thank you for putting that in the chat. That's really useful for everybody to know about, these kind of networks that we can get more information from. We had a couple of comments from colleagues in Kenya talking about what the EU does outside of the EU. And I think it's an important reminder that we need to be working globally. SDG 5 is a global goal. And all of us, our work needs to be not just within the EU, but thinking about solidarity with women and girls groups all around the world. So anyway, I'm going to come to Natalie. I think we're going to pick up one question quickly from the chat before we close. Natalie.
Hello, there was a question asking for statistics against if there's a gender divide between urban and rural areas. And I see that Lydia already answered with a link in the chat, but maybe she wants to say more orally.
Lydia, could you put your microphone on? Because we had a question about the differences between urban and rural, if there were differences between women's participation or the barriers. Would you be able to quickly answer that for us? If you press on speak,
okay.
You're great. Thank
Sorry.
you. That's okay.
Yes, so not particularly differentiating urban and rural, but you can have somehow this information through the indicator that I just posted on the chat. Because country by country you can find the different regions. So yeah, but it's the only way. Otherwise, we don't collect or differentiate specifically coming from rural and urban. Although this is an intersecting inequality that definitely needs to be considered. Mm-hmm. And a good point for the future to improve the data collection.
Thanks, Lydia. Yes, we can. That's something that maybe we need to know more about going forward, indeed, and have data about evidence-based practice. So I think it's time to wrap up from our side because we finish in 11:15. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this morning, all the participants, and for putting your interesting thoughts and questions into the chat. We haven't had time for a huge amount of conversation, but it's been really interesting to see those. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for talking about their own personal experience, what their hopes are, what their expectations are, some of the really technical answers to this as well, which we all need to know, and we can learn from each other how to improve gender parity at local level by networking, by sharing knowledge and inspiration exactly like this. So I just want to finish by saying we're going to take a break now. This afternoon session starts at 2:00, and it's going to be about violence, online violence and social media in relation to political participation for women especially, who tend to be targets of this. And then a final session about women politicians as role models. So please join us for that. Come back on board at 2:00, the same link. And we're looking forward to seeing you then. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this session, and happy International Women's Day to everybody. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a nice lunch break. Welcome to this afternoon session of the amazing conference organized by the Committee of Regions, dedicated to specifically attracting more women to politics, and we will dedicate the afternoon session to the issue of online harassment and violence that's happening online and social media, and how we can collectively create conditions for greater participation of women in social media and online political engagement. My name is Lucia Kleshnicova. I'm working at the European Commission. I'm also a member of the Equality Task Force of the Commissioner Helena Dalli, and I will be accompanying you through the two panels of today's afternoon. Also through the last session with the amazing member of the European Parliament, Samira Rafaela, and the member of the Committee of the Regions, Jasna Gabric, who are amazing role models for many, many female politicians out there. So I hope you will have time to stay with us until the end of the second session as well. For those of you who weren't with us this morning, I'd like to remind us of a couple of housekeeping remarks. All mics are muted to avoid any background noises. So please use the chat button that you will find on the top right of your tool where you're looking at us, to obviously pass on any comments or questions that you may have for our speakers. This session is recorded and web streamed also on YouTube. So just go ahead and search for the COR audiovisual channel if you would like to share this link with any of your circles. You are also supported with the amazing service of our interpreters, to which we are immensely grateful. Interpretation is available in English, French, German, Spanish, Italian, and Polish. You will find this service when you go to the bottom menu of your tool where it says Audio Channel Selector. You will be able to choose the language. We already know that this afternoon we will have one speech given in Italian, so make sure you familiarize yourself with the tool if you don't speak Italian. Other than that, we will also use Slido. So there's a question coming up very soon, so make sure that you go to slido.com to participate in the conversation. You will use the hashtag Women's Day COR. You also see it on the slide on your screen, so make sure that you connect to our Slido space as well. If you want to tweet about the conference, you can use the hashtag Power2Her with 2 as a numerical sign. And so that's a little bit for the housekeeping remarks. This morning you had a chance to listen to several members of the European Parliament, of the Committee of the Regions, members of their Young Elected Politicians program, about projects and initiatives that are put in place by different administrative levels and instruments to enhance participation of women in the political decision making. We have also heard from the European Institute for Gender Equality that women account only for 34% of members of regional assemblies and less than a third of mayors and other council leaders, which is obviously a massive this balance that we are also here today to address or discuss how that can be addressed. However, it's not just the question of numbers, it's also a question of the quality of environment that the female political candidates and participation and representatives are entering when they're engaging in politics. And so that's why we're here today, this afternoon, to discuss the issue of online violence and hate speech. We know that in particular for the starting politicians who may not have access yet to mainstream media, their participation on social media is a must if they want to have platform for communication about what they stand for. And so that's why it's so important that we create a safe space for them to be able to feel safe when they're considering political engagement. Otherwise, many of us have seen what is the quality of the conversation and attacks that can be happening there. I'm already grateful to our speakers for their willingness to be here with us today and share not just their research and their practical advice based on the projects that they've put together, but also oftentimes a lot about their personal experience and how they have been dealing with all kinds of negative phenomena that are going on when we try to marry online platforms and political engagement. And so now without any further ado, here's our first question for Slido. So go ahead and switch to the Slido window in your browser, where you will find the first question, which is, I'm just wondering, in your opinion, how can online hate speech impact women's participation in politics? You will have a chance to choose on a scale from 1 to 10, where 10 is an absolute brutal no-go, where we feel what's happening on social media and in online space is such a turn-off and such a dangerous and unpleasant space that it can really serve as a turn-off for women to be engaged in politics, whereas number 1 would be a situation when you feel it's not really a big deal and it's all part of our everyday realities and we should take it as it is and probably not really consider it as one of the counter forces preventing us from political engagement. So it's really just to measure the temperature about how big a deal we feel it is among ourselves in the room. There's a lot of tens I see, so seems like this is a very important conversation to be had. We don't have a question on this, but I would also be wondering if there are many aspiring politicians listening to us today. So if any of you listening to us are considering getting involved in politics anytime soon, maybe write a yes into the chat window so that we see how many of you are out there. And with this, a little bit of a scene setting, I would like to give floor to our first speaker, Daniel Arnaldo, who's from National Democratic Institute, a researcher, leading advisor on technology, information space, hate speech, and online violence. And he will share with us results of their report done on Tweets That Chill and the methodologies, obviously, what are the consequences of online hate on political participation. Daniel, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I'll just set up my presentation real quickly. So I just wanted to thank the European Committee of the Regions for having me to this and acknowledge as the only man on the panel. I'm very happy to be in the company of such a strong and wonderful group of women here today on International Women's Day. I want to share with you some of our perspective and work on the issues of the National Democratic Institute, particularly the work of our Gender, Women, and Democracy team, where we have projects active in contexts all over the world. Just to give you kind of an overview of our perspective and our work on online violence against women in politics, you can understand, and I think the survey bears out that online platforms are important in helping women overcome barriers in becoming politically active, whether it's being a candidate or simply voting or participating in political processes. But at the same time, online violence and abuse creates a hostile environment, and it can silence them, push them out of politics. And it also creates a system where it can be anonymous, borderless, sustained, and permanent. So it's changing the rules of politics online in a way. And in this way, it subverts democracy and it has a chilling effect. So a major report that we've put out in the past couple of years is basically named Tweets That Chill, how online language can chill freedom of speech online for women in politics. And we have a methodology where we create lexicons of hate speech in different languages and use these to track hate speech in different forms across contexts. And this report looks at cases as varied as Colombia, Indonesia, and Kenya internationally. And we find both similar patterns, but also unique cases of language and how it is used to attack women online. You can see that there are different forms of how this works that many of you are familiar with, anything from using automation or online groups to coordinate attacks. The goals of this are different, but often connected, whether it's to undermine their sense of safety or their sense that they can engage in politics. It limits their participation. In many ways, this causes self-censorship. And before even the tweet or the social media is created, whether it's a candidate or whether it's a person simply participating in the political process as a voter and a citizen, it can cause self-censorship. So this changes the perception of how people can participate within the political process. And it really curtails the ambitions of young women and new entrants in politics. And we found this in cases the world over. It's connected to, in many ways, online disinformation, which has become a similarly problematic component of online social media in different ways. Disinformation explicitly manipulates sociocultural norms, social cleavages, ideological divisions for the desired political outcomes of those who are spreading it. So whether it's spreading lies about a woman's perspective, whether it's spreading lies about their life or about the way that they're participating in politics, this becomes a major component of many political processes globally, and it often uses hate speech as a kind of combined force in social media and in conversations online. So we have to understand what is the impact of this disinformation. What are the demographics that are particularly attacked and open to manipulation through this disinformation, and why? How are they targeted? I think I gave some examples before in terms of doxing, in terms of the use of online groups in different ways, whether automated or organic, actual humans, and the way in which these groups are targeted and how social ideologies, whether religious, class-based, race-based, can be leveraged to create these outcomes. So we have to understand these different components. You can see that I think this is a very old tactic in a way that goes back to much earlier politics. Here you see Marie Antoinette, that was the target of revolutionary fervor and often the use of hate speech and disinformation, unfortunately, as well, in terms of her extravagance, her vices. Let her eat cake, let them eat cake, right? This is a now a common phrase that continues to this day, and I think there may have been some question as to whether she even said it. So there's a lot of problems around these issues that go back in time for many years, decades, and centuries. So the use of gender disinformation continues today, and the norms, the identities, the relations are often resistant to change. And I think within each case that we look at, it has an impact on the country's political landscape. And these norms are effective in being in helping to shape the political outcome or the social outcomes in different ways, because they establish rules of the game that don't change over time and are accepted by all. Another major report that we've done looking specifically at disinformation is a report with Demos, Engendering Hate, where we did research in online context in Poland and Europe and in the Philippines, and looking at the way that online gender disinformation is utilized, but also particularly how it aligns with the aims of states and the aims of political campaigns, and how this can amplify and really create an exponential effect in how it is used. So the findings from this report shows that in many ways, some portions of the population that are women come to withdraw from politics, directed by fear and violence against women in politics. It shifts popular support, these kind of campaigns overall, from both men and women away from politically active women, and it undermines a significant leadership demographic. And so in a way, this is influencing how both female and male voters view particular parties, policies, or political orders. In a way, I think this is really a global phenomenon, in that we see a lot of these campaigns repeated in different contexts, whether it's in Europe or in the Philippines or Indonesia or other places. So this is something that we've seen at NDI in various cases, and we're working in different ways to build solutions collectively with groups, whether they're civil society organizations, parties, or others. We have a couple of solutions that we've been working to develop in collective with other groups that we work with, whether they're individual, building networks of women who are actively engaged in politics or supporting them within countries, within regions, thinking about ways that CSOs and political parties can engage in the problem, whether it's maintaining databases of abuse, using lexicons as we developed in these reports, and building reporting that we can then use to create reports for social media platforms, for governments. But the social media platforms themselves, whether Facebook, Twitter, or others, need to invest in the infrastructure and active training to build that outreach, but also to create standards for their own content moderation and their own policy people. So I think there needs to be an understanding that this is a multi-stakeholder issue and one that needs to be invested in on all sides. I think there are also tools that you can think about too that we've found useful are ParityBot and iHollaback, but there are many others out there. These tools can be used to amplify women in politics and voices and respond to hate speech as it occurs, and also to report it. And partners should work collectively to both link with these movements and link with these tools and support them, but also think about ways of avoiding the Streisand effect, as it's called, or amplifying the hate speech by calling it out. It may be more effective to report it to the systems directly and work in different ways to bring it down. There are various solutions here, and I think we at NDI are engaged in a number of different research and training programs globally to engage on these issues. And we're really eager for partners and engagement globally in Europe and elsewhere to work on these issues. So I really welcome partnership and discussion and questions to come. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been very insightful since Heather. I feel for the conversation. We've also posted the link to your report in the chat, so all of you should be able to download the report for more details and connect with NDI and Daniel for more details. You've mentioned how important it is to have obviously support structures around the political candidates, and so that's why I'm so excited to welcome Lea Bodossian as our next speaker, who is the founder of the advocacy support group I Am Here International, which in the meantime has been active in so many different countries on multiple continents, and is one of the most effective tools that I've noticed myself that support female candidates to basically disseminate that pressure that they're under when there's an attack really happening on social media. So Lea, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. Thank you very much, Danielle. I want to express my gratitude to the Committee of the Region for inviting me today, but most importantly for putting on the agenda that notion of violence, of online violence against politician women, because that is indeed one of the main difficulties and one of the barriers that all women and women in politics in particular have to face. Because I have no fear. Just before, in order to prepare for today, I Googled the name of two French politicians, one from each of the side of the political spectrum. And I did not put a very nasty word beside their name. I just put the word naked. And I had 1,600,000 hit answers on Google for one, and only 760,000 answers for the other one. So it gives us the amplitude or an idea of the amplitude of the problem. And I discovered on that occasion that there are indeed websites that exist where you just put a normal photo of a woman and it transforms the photo of that woman into an horrific and very, very crude photo that can be afterwards be used in order to harass that poor woman. So I am Léa Bodossian. I'm not the founder of I Am Here International, but I have been active in the network for several years now. And I am talking on behalf of that network that is active in 13 countries and has 150,000 members worldwide. What we are doing is counter-speaking. And we counter-speak against any kind of online violence. And as such, we've seen a lot of violence against politician women. And that violence can be either verbal or graphic. It sends a woman back to gender stereotype, because a woman should not be into politics. She should be in the kitchen, having children, or doing anything but leaving the boys alone between themselves. It also refers some alleged moral degradation of the woman or of her family, of relatives. So the violence can also take the form of body shaming, if necessary, with modified image, as I mentioned before. But it also takes the form of direct threats and abuses, which in the most violent form led to have impact in real life, because online violence is not different, has consequence in real life. We know that we have all heard of, unfortunately, of Jo Cox, who died, who was murdered, but there are plenty of other women who are daily harassed. The women moderators of our network are receiving daily death threats, rape threats, gang rape threats, etc., etc. Many of the women I know are no longer using a female first name when they are online, in order to avoid or diminish the number of abuse that they receive. And when you're trying to fight the online violence against politician women, you can encounter a number of pitfalls, and that is a typology that was not made by me, but by a woman researcher whose name is Eleonora Esposito. The first one that she calls is digital determinism. Ooh, it is internet. What did you expect? Of course, it's normal. She knew what to expect. If you're a woman politician, it's normal. No, it is not normal. You cannot have online violence that is not acceptable in real life either. The second pitfall when you're trying to find online violence, it's gamification. Oh, it's only for fun. If you can't take a joke, if you can't take that violence, you can't do anything. You have nothing to do into politics. And another one is a free speech ethos, or I would rather say a free speech pathos. Well, we can no longer say anything. Humorists nowadays, stand-up comedians of the past would not be allowed to speak. So these are three types of obstacle that needs to be overcome when you want to fight online hate. And that violence online is amplified by the velocity, the volume, and the variety of social network. So definitely, and when I saw the first question on Slido, I did vote, and I did vote no, definitely online media, social media are not a safe place for women. What is it that can be done? Because you can either decide, well, I would just ignore that, and then what the fact is that violence will be maintained and will be given more visibility. There is a rule of thumb that 1% of people on the internet or using social media make 10% of the comments, of the political comments. And so they gain in visibility. By nature, the hateful comments have more visibility than the others because then they generate a reaction of the angry little emoticon of the person who disagree, and then they get on the algorithms, they get on the top and they become the more visible. But other than that, you have the 99% other percent whom we can call the silent majority. They read that, and by reading that and seeing mostly that, the hateful speech becomes a norm. It becomes normal. So it becomes more and more polarized. So what we do at I Am Here, we are intervening. We have our groups. We are organized through groups. And every day in every country where we are present, we are detecting the articles where you have the most violence or the most hate or the most disinformation. And we are trying to put ponderated, calm, reasonated, factual comments on those articles, on those threads where you have so much violence. And by liking each other's comments, we manage to reach the top level and to be visible also by the silent majority. And on those occasions, we have defended on many occasions politician women. And we have received from either side of the political fence, we have received thank you because it does work. It also shows them that they are not alone, that the hateful people are not the only one. And it helps creating a sort of a good willing community. So we are sometimes called snowflakes. Well, that's cool. Snowflakes are beautiful. None of them are, they are all very different. And we provide a sort of safe space for women and for people who want to intervene against hate, and notably against hate against politician women. We are also doing trainings to help people, to help them creating a community, because what Daniel was saying before was very important. He was advising to have a community that help a community of women. We don't think that it should be only a community of women. We think that it's everybody's problem when there is hate against politician women. But it's important not to go alone out of the wild. And we also think that it is time for politician women to start learning how to react and start learning, not considering it is normal and that it is yet one other bitter drink that they have to sip in order to stay legit. So these were some introductory remarks for our conversation.
Excellent, Leah. Thank you very much. This is all very scary. I have goosebumps listening to you. So thank you very much for sharing. And we now will have a chance to listen to active politicians who will be able to share a little bit more about how it was actually for them. I'm wondering if we have any questions from the audience. Please don't forget that on the top right corner of your menu, you have a chat functionality. If that window is closed for you, just open it and type any question you may have for our guests. Of course, you can also pose the question live on camera, but maybe for most of it, it's going to be easier to type it in the chat. I hear from the team we don't have any questions, so I suggest that in the meantime, as you're processing it, go ahead and think of your questions, and we can move on to the next set of the speakers, which are 4 women who are active local or regional politicians, either members of the Committee of the Regions or members of the Young Elected Politicians program of the committee. Obviously, women politicians face all kinds of obstacles which often prevent them from conducting their political work safely and professionally, especially because of sexism, violence, all kinds of threats and negative attitudes and stereotypes that they're facing, in particular during the pre-election campaigning. This is absolutely unacceptable, as we've already said several times. And so I would like to hand over now to Jelena Drenjanin, who is a member of the European Committee of the Regions for Sweden, who will be sharing her own experience. Jelena?
Can you hear me?
Yes, hello, thank you.
Yeah, good. Yeah, you never know with the devices. Thank you so much, and I'm happy that we are talking about this issue, especially since I have been a spokesperson for gender issues in the European Council of Local and Regional Congress, and I also had a report on fighting sexism against women in politics at local and regional level. And we have been working many years now to have more women entering into politics. I mean, it's been 100 years of women voting. So as the earlier speaker says, the norm of politics is male. And in changing this, we have to have an environment where women are safe and welcome. And what we can see now, due to this problem with online harassments and threats and so on, is that we managed to get women into politics. But if this is not addressed, we are losing these women because they're going to leave politics, because they're not going to put themselves in danger or their families. And I'm not going to repeat what everybody else said, but they did a survey among members in the Parliament of European Council, and 46.9% have received death threats or threats of rape or beating. I mean, imagine being threatened that you would be beating because you're in politics or raped. And 58% had been targeted of online sexist attacks on social networks. Every fourth woman have suffered sexual violence. So, and especially younger women under 40 are more frequently subjected to psychological or sexual harassment, and that's very serious. So this is a democracy problem, a real serious democracy problem, that young women are hindered. They are trying to scare them, to silence them, not to have their human rights of being a part of a democracy. So this is crucial that we address this. And what can we do? Well, we have to set up mechanisms, both of reporting, but also on support services. And we have to have appropriate complaint and investigation mechanism where you as a individual also are confidential. And we have to ask these questions. We have to conduct surveys all the time. We have to be there. So if somebody says, do you know if this is happening in your constituency or your committee of the regions or in municipality or in regions, I'm supposed to say, yes, we check out this every year and we have found out this and this. But that's not enough. We also have to know what to do. So I would say that in one way, the social media is dangerous in a way, but I have also seen young women taking and using it as tools to speak out and to make their story heard. And I mean, the cultural and social norms, they are difficult to attach because, as earlier speaker says, the man has been the norm. So we're going to change that. We have to start sharing good examples, role models, and talking about all the strong women that there are. But we have to remember one thing. All perpetrators, it doesn't mean if they are rapists or they are whatever kind of, if the victim is silenced, they want to silence the victim because that's when they win. So if we as women use the social media platforms to speak out and not be quiet, and address these issues, we can also take the power and set the stories and change the norms of politics. But we have to do this together with the male, because all men are not bad. Most of them are really good guys, but the little percentage that are destroying our democracy, that are destroying everybody's possibility to access to human rights, we have to address them and also have the mechanisms to stop it. So I will say we have to achieve gender equality, but we have to address these issues, but also have mechanisms to report them, to handle them, but also to put them aside. We should not accept it, and it should be a zero tolerance, zero. So I think by having more women, having equal participation, we are setting norms. Because I think most men don't accept that their daughters, their sisters, their mothers, their friends cannot have the same opportunities and the same rights as they do themselves. I'll stop there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yelena, so much for this powerful call. Obviously, most of us would agree that it's a powerful mix of tools that need to be in place, both from the legislative top-down level, but also the bottom-up community support. And we're not going to move any further without this full menu of tools being out there. We already keep on getting questions about the legislative instruments being sufficient or not, so we will get back to them in the Q&A session later on. Now I would like us to move further towards the European South. Our next speaker is Daniela Ballico, who's a member of the European Committee of Regions and a mayor of Ciampino. She will be speaking in Italian, so as I said before, please click in the top menu on your audio channel selector if you want to continue listening to us in English. And Daniela kindly agreed to share with us her personal experience of how she's dealing with online harassment and abuse on a daily basis.
Grazie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for inviting me today. Thank you. I'm a young mayor, not young in age because I'm 48, but I'm a young mayor in the sense that it's the first time that I've been mayor of my city of 40,000 inhabitants. It's not a small city, it's an important area. So when I entered into the elections, I realised how hard a woman's life in politics is. Even though I've already worked in a trade union, the UGL, where I understood how rare it was to be a woman in the workplace. Often I was the only woman in an institution, and certainly the youngest woman. So first I had to overcome the barrier of sexism first, which exists in these unfortunately masculine environments. And often I had to work even harder to demonstrate how capable I was in the sector, harder than the men did. And so my trade union experience was a very male world, and with that in my background, I entered the mayoral election, and that thanks to a man, because he was the coordinator of and he was the one who told me that a city of 40,000 people needed its first female mayor. So I was put forward by a male colleague. And unfortunately, I was subject to very severe attacks during my campaign online. I can't say very much about it because there are legal proceedings underway where my portable laptop and my phone were used during my campaign. My images were stolen from my private accounts, and a file was created. It was printed out, and this, with very personal selfies and very intimate photos that I'd taken, were sent to other politicians, Salvini, Tajani. All the major political leaders received this file with my private photos. Then phone calls started where people were saying, withdraw from the election campaign in Ciampino because we will publish these photos. Now, I complained to the Electoral Committee. The first thing I did was to go to the police to complain, because at the time I didn't know who it was. So I complained there was an anonymous threat. And so I have to say a big thank you to the police, because they carried out a very swift investigation. I'm a little bit emotional telling the story because it was very difficult. It was a difficult time for me. You can't imagine. Tomorrow you wake up and there are photos of your private life all over town, and so it's a very difficult experience. So I went to the police. They carried out an investigation, a whole series of controls. And fortunately, the inspector in Velletri caught 4 people, and one of those people had already been suspected of doing this sort of thing. And so they found my PC and my phone, and that was evidence that these things had been done. And fortunately, this didn't harm my election prospects. I had there were press conferences. I carried out press conferences to explain what had happened, explain that I had filed a complaint about it. Unfortunately, they still elected me. The citizens of my city believed in me. They believed my side of the story. And so the people who were trying to make me withdraw my candidacy were not successful. Now, the leader of our party said all young people in politics experience attacks in the media. And I have to say, you wouldn't believe the attacks that come through the internet. It's really hard to understand, and it's even harder when you hear those kinds of words coming from journalists and from newspapers. Just a few attacks that Giorgia Meloni, who is the leader of the party, has undergone. What can I say? This is the newspaper. The journalist refers to this politician as a cow, as various other different insulting names, and this is something that and somebody who's ignorant. And this is something that appeared in the newspaper. The only party that says no to the Draghi government is the only party where there's a woman leader. That's also in the newspaper. So here. Here you have journalists being surprised that the leader of a major party can be a woman. Then there's other newspapers which emphasise the fact that the leader of our party, Giorgia, is married to a man who's 4 years younger, and they're still not married. Sorry, they're together and they're not married, and so she should feel guilty because she's a political leader and her partner is younger. So it's very difficult for women to come into politics under these conditions when even newspapers are writing such things about you. In Europe, women in politics, like myself don't have an easy job, but it's difficult to enter it under these conditions. Very often in politics, politics is directed by men and by men's thoughts. And so we need to try to keep moving forward in spite of the attacks. And we all come up against problems one way or another, some bigger than others, like in my case, where people end up being taken to court. But this sort of thing is a problem that impacts us all, and we need to make an effort to find it. It's important to speak up, but that's how we can overcome these issues. Because when the attacks on me were underway, I felt very alone. And I had my family, and I had many people, in fact, who supported me, other candidates who didn't receive any calls or any other attacks, and they also supported me. So have I finished? Have I got more time? If not, I'll continue. If not, then that's all. And I remain available for any other questions.
We are pretty much out of time, unless you want to add any final remarks.
Avevo ancora un po' di tempo?
I'm sorry, I have to switch back my interpretation on. I didn't understand what you just said.
Sì, non c'è. Ho capito che.
Have I still got a few minutes left? Is that right? I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Have I got a few minutes left to speak? Is that right?
What you were saying. I have some issues with the interpretation here, but I think the time's up for now. So unless there's anything else that you would like to share at this stage, we can get back to you in the Q&A session. I would like to thank you for this absolutely mind-blowingly vulnerable share. We can hardly imagine what it's like unless we hear these experiences firsthand. So thank you very much for sharing so openly. I'm sure it's going to activate many people among us, not to stay, hidden out of the fear, but really activate towards more support for the other women out there, because it's really important that we create the communities of support. And herewith, I would like to continue with Nina Raatilainen, who's our next speaker. Also a member of the European Committee of the Regions, this time going back north. She's a member of the Turku City Council. She was elected already in her 20s, and that's why probably online bullying and harassment was an inevitable part of her early political engagement journey, thickened her skin and got her much more involved in speaking against gender equality in politics. And so Nina, we are curious to hear your angle of the story now. Nina, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Yes, hello, over to you.
Hi, can you see me or just hear me?
I can't see you yet, but I can hear you.
Okay. I will try to put the camera on once again. It did work out when we tested, but there seems to be some issues. You are not able to help me from there, are you?
Me not, but I'm sure the team is working on it now.
Okay. Okay, it did work okay when we tested, but I think we'll just need to go on and continue. So thank you.
The team says they can't really do anything, so I'm wondering if you want to continue like this, or should we maybe go to Jana first, and we'll see if in the meantime you can fix your camera? What do you think, Nina?
Yes, maybe we can continue with the other speaker, if it's okay.
Okay, I don't know, Jana, if you're ready. Jana is our member of the Young Elected Politicians Program for Luxembourg. Her story is interesting because there's also a race angle part to her story of being discriminated on multiple levels. So I don't know, Jana, if we are messing up with the agenda a little bit, if you'd be willing to share before Nina fixes her camera. Now I confused everybody and we don't have anybody. Now we have Jana coming up. Yes, hello. Thank you very much for your flexibility.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm sitting here listening and I'm prepared, so it's all good.
Well, thank you. So the floor is yours, Jana.
So as we heard, harassment and hate speech towards female politicians is a real thing, and it is increasing all over Europe. I know what I'm talking about because I know how it feels to be told that you deserve to be beaten up when you say no to have a drink on a Saturday evening to talk about political campaigns or programs. I know how it feels to fear for your life when after a dinner with your friends you walk to your car and you see guys running after you, telling you that you deserve to go back to where you come from instead of running for office. And this issue of hate speech online and also offline is something that I didn't address so often because around me people would say, are you sure that you're not exaggerating? Are you sure it's so bad? So I learned to just normalize the fact that I'm being, that I experienced this hate speech because, you know, I'm a woman and I'm young and I am a person of color. And people tell me, yeah, but you chose to become a politician, so you have to expect this. And so I normalized it, but I had to learn the hard way until all this started affecting my mental health. I started becoming silent in situations of injustice because I feared of the backlash I would get. But I realized quickly that something had to be done, and I started talking about it around other female politicians, but also around activists, because next to being a politician, I'm also a very committed advocate for rights of minorities and rights of young people all over Europe. So I started talking about it, and the more I would talk about it, the more women would walk up to me and say that they experienced the same. And I was surprised, but I said it feels also healing. So I realized speaking up about it is one of the solutions that we should do. And no matter who we are and no matter the mandate that we hold, on what level it is, we need to still encourage other women to run for office, because the reason why we experience this is because the political sphere looks like it's full of men, and the norm is just a man being on the leadership positions. And that's why we experience what we are currently experiencing. And hate speech towards women is really designed to silence us, to intimidate us, and to stop us from running again. And so we, at the first speaker talked about it, the chilling effect. It's not just about now, okay, we speak about it and then it's fine, but it's also about encouraging other women to actually run for office, even though they see that they are dangerous by running for office. If someone looks up to me, maybe a girl that looks like me says, I also want to run, but Jana is experiencing this violence online, I'm not gonna run. So here it's important, and this is something I started to do, is to teach younger generations how to deal and how to learn, like how to cope with hate speech online, and to tell them that they are not alone. And few advices that I give them is, first, to not react to hate with hate, because this is something I did. I already experienced hate speech before I became a politician. So I was all in, always fighting online, but then I realized quickly that this doesn't work. So you never react to hate with hate. You need to give facts. And yeah, don't blame others. Try to have a discussion. If it works, if it doesn't, just leave it. try to report the messages, try to reach out to someone. And what I do is really to reach out to women that hold the same positions that I do, or that face the same struggles because they come from a minority group. And I talk to them. But it's really important that we still encourage women to run for office, to normalize the fact that there are women on leadership positions. Because if it's normal to see a female politician, for example, looking like me, then we will not have this hate towards us anymore in the future. At least this is what I hope. I'm very hopeful for the next generations of girls, and I keep advocating for them to still run for office because they deserve a seat on the table. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you for these powerful words of encouragement. It's really, breathtaking on the one hand to hear what is the reality, but also seeing how, having been through the depth of the experience, you can actually mobilize the force within and figure out your way that works to deal with it. For those of you who might be interested, what is this Young Elected Politicians program of the Committee of Regions? We've also pasted the link in the chat, so please check it out. I'm sure it's a powerful platform for politicians like Yana to empower each other and learn from each other on an international scale. So if there's somebody considering running or having been elected recently, please share it with them. It might be an additional source of vitamins for them to be able to flow through the political experience a bit more smoothly. So thanks, Yana, once again. And I'm wondering, Nina, if you managed to sort out the camera issue in the meantime.
Hi, Lucia. Yes, I think I managed to repair the issue. So thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you for inviting me. And sorry so much about this difficulties. Yeah, it has been so inspiring to hear all the speakers. For myself, I have been chair of the Green Party group in the City Council of Turku, which is in southwest coast of Finland. And I have been a member of City Council since I was 24 years old. My perspective in online harassment against women in politics derives, I think, from suppression and double standards that I think that women had to deal before online harassment even became that kind of the thing. And I know at least that I had to. In a way, I always want to emphasize that online harassment is part of the very same phenomenon as gender-based offline violence, hate speech, and harassment. It is just a form of harassment against women, but one that is perhaps more visible to others besides the victims themselves. I do think that online harassment and hate speech just became recognized more in a larger scale due to the pandemic. This morning we heard important facts of women's representation in local and regional level in Europe, and sadly, there is no country or municipality that would not need to work on achieving greater gender parity. I do believe that we are in a good direction, and I have been very glad to see this event taking place. I believe that inequality has been feeding to what we today call online harassment and hate speech against women politicians. Women often are a clear minority, left out when most important cabinet posts are given, and excluded of discussions regarding economic politics, security politics, and given floor for healthcare issues or educational politics. There has been vast gender inequality in politics, and in a way, it is no wonder that internet reflects this inequality. Well, I myself have been very proud and vocal about feminism and inequality in my career, and the F word is a sure way of attracting ideologies that do not want to see women being vocal or gaining more power. To me, this has often resulted in a backlash of comments in social media platforms and even some nasty attacks of my peers, male politicians. I don't think that online or offline harassment is equal when it comes to topics that women politicians address. In my experience, attacks are more plenty and more fierce whenever I speak of women's rights, LGBT rights, or immigration. And in this regard, I think we need to be very concerned and very truthful about that online harassment is not always without the larger contexts. Especially when female politicians or politicians of minority background speak, there are groups that target us because it is part of the goal that they try for in the bigger picture. In Europe, there are conservative groups that want to make women smaller and take away women's rights. If you bully female politicians long enough or fill their social media accounts with threats long enough, eventually some women get tired of the hate speech and start to censor themselves. Now, this is the goal behind organized attacks against female politicians online. Besides local and regional politics, I work in Plan International for Girls' Rights, and last autumn we launched the biggest publication on gender-based online harassment so far, and it is called Free to Be Online, if you want to look up for it. We found out that girls and young women everywhere in the world actually face online harassment, and in fact 58% of girls surveyed had experienced online harassment. So this is just a problem of us all. Online harassment and these severe outcomes have very drastic effects if we do not take action. I think in worst case, online harassment shrinks diversity in decision making because less girls, and especially girls with minority backgrounds, become involved with politics and public life in the first place. I can't even begin to think how this lack of diversity affects on what politics look like and what kind of decisions will be made. We should perhaps celebrate diversity more often and more visibly, because diversity makes our regions and societies better for everyone, for sure. I would also like to, as colleagues did, suggest some solutions and actions we should take. First of all, and what I think this panel is all about, we need to stop taking gender-based online harassment lightly. There should be no space for first threatening female politicians and then saying afterwards that it was just a joke. In my experience, there is a real pattern in justifying hate speech with humor. Another thing we need to stop is treating hate speech as something you just have to grow skin against. It tells absolutely nothing about persons' capabilities, whether they can stand hate speech. I think it's very damaging to all of us if we say that this is something that you just need to simply tolerate. This discourse makes it a lot more difficult to young people to enter politics and public life. We also need to have those people in decision making and those people who are sensitive and can't take insults. Politics should never be just for tough people only, and this is the risk of having online harassment that is not taken seriously. So I think many of us have felt somewhat lonely when dealing with online harassment. I think it's time that parties and municipalities have focal points of equality and online safety. We have so many processes and practices for harassment at workplaces and against it. And politicians also work in municipalities, but there really is no structure of support against online or offline harassment to say. I think we really need a safety net for female politicians everywhere. Because when a female politician gets a rape threat that is too vague for police investigation, there is still need to some structure and some help and some support for female politicians to cope with it. Lastly, I think we need to replace misogynist ideologies with a consistent narrative of equality. I don't think that online harassment can really be fully solved ever before we see comprehensive change in attitudes towards women in politics and women's rights and representation. We need to talk about feminism and do it boldly, because there is no shame in believing equality of all sexes. Feminism is a beautiful thing, and internet can also be a very beautiful and empowering place if it's used for positive issues. What I dream of is feminist internet, because when it comes to a world without online harassment, that is what we need. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I wonder if feminist internet will be among one of the takeaways for our audience. Before we go and ask you about your main takeaways, let's go to our Q&A. I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Natalie, who will share with us what's actually happening in the chat.
Thank you. We have some comments in the chat, and basically many people are saying thank you to the speakers who testify what they are experiencing online. Andrea Kronwall is asking a question about online harassment, and if one of the solutions could be that the fines or the punishment for people who harass women online are not strong enough. So maybe that's a question or a topic that the speakers could give more details on. And we also have Sally Nisho, who moderated the session this morning, who is quoting Maya Angelou, saying, "Every time a woman stands up for herself, without knowing it possibly, without claiming it, she stands up for all women." Thanks, Sally, for sharing that quote in the chat. And I think that's the links of the different reports that were mentioned as well are in the chat if you want to copy-paste them for further use. And that's it.
Thank you, Natalie. It's beautiful to have Maya Angelou in the space with us as well. I'm wondering if any of our speakers would like to comment on the regulatory question. I don't know, Danielle, if from the NDI's research, if you have any opinion on this, or I see Leah wants to comment.
Yes, there are clearly a lack of legislative and of police means to fight online violence. I read an article recently that in France that the unit in charge of dealing with online cyber criminality is composed of 36 people for the entire realm of online violence, be it terrorism threats or violence against women. That is why it is essential that when there is a threat, when something illegal is said, and once again, it's not always easy to make the difference between something which is an opinion and something that is illegal, but we should be able to do it. When something illegal is being said, it is essential to report it so that it enters the statistics and it becomes visible, and that at the end, politicians, men and women, all stand together to give more means to the police to fight and tackle the topic.
Thank you, Leah. Indeed. Is there anybody else from our dear speakers who would like to contribute to completion of this conversation today? Yelena? And then Nina. You need to click on the speak button. I'm not sure if you're trying to speak.
Now you can hear me.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to make a parallel on how to get to the legislation. It's about, I know many years ago, I was working hard to change the legislation on grooming, you know, when adults are trying to contact children for sexual abuse. In order to change legislation, we have to start with talking about it and make aware of what the problem is, because this is a wide problem that we have to work with also the owners of the social media platforms and so on. And I know that every day Facebook is closing down 1 million fake accounts. And by time you get who's done what, so it's very difficult. But I think that there are many steps before we get the good legislation. But what we can do is change the norms, and there also the tolerance in the community, in the society, in the political parties, in the institutions. Then we will get to the legislation. The legislation by itself is not going to change the norms and the behavior. So we have to start somewhere and be very, how shall I say, patient and talk about it, not be silent and stand up. And I'm horrified when I hear about this from Italy, but I'm not surprised because I have met many women in different countries. And if you don't have children, what kind of a woman are you? You're probably lesbian. You don't have children. If you have children, you are a bad mother. You're not with. So the blame and shame, just get over it. But by talking about things, then I think like an individual, you start to feel that it's not about me, it's about the other person's mindset. So if we are going to change things, we have to put it out in the open. And look at Me Too, it changed a lot.
Yeah, feels like it's the part of the history that we're now going through, that so many of you are bravely contributing towards alleviating, and hopefully we're not to be having this conversation for too long, as legislation will catch up and the culture and social media will transform over time. We have a couple of final remarks from Nina and Danielle, and then we will move over to our final session of today's conference.
Yes,
Nina?
thank you so much. I think that the previous speaker summarized very well the answer to the excellent question. It is for sure that our criminal laws they do not recognize enough the variety of online harassment and all the forms of online bullying and everything that's developing. But I think that the most important thing to tackle is in the norms and in the attitudes, and in the same reasons that there is a gender-based violence also in the offline world. So we really need to tackle the norms and attitudes first, and that would really make a big difference. And it's good that you raised up the Me Too movement. I think that is a very positive movement that has not gone far enough, because that is the movement and discussion we can have and use and utilize to really make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Danielle? We've seen you for a second and then you disappeared. Danielle? Yes?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. It's really great points by everyone on the call, and I agree. I mean, I think internationally the laws are always going to struggle to catch up with these kind of issues. There are many cases where the laws are built for traditional media environment, or where they are built for one kind of online media environment, and then it changes. We go from MySpace and Friendster to Facebook and Twitter to TikTok and WeChat, and it's going to be hard to keep up. But I think there are instruments you can use, particularly within the European Union, that can have more success, not only at national legislation, but supranational. And there are two examples, actually, the Code on Disinformation and the Code on Hate Speech within the European Union, that are interesting because they are not only trying to harmonize European laws and national laws, but also trying to gain engagement and assess companies and how they are applying policies internally and how they are building codes of hate speech within their private policies. And I think that's a really key aspect of this that is going to be challenging to get at, but it can be really powerful and impactful if we do. If we're able to engage with the Facebooks of the world and the Twitters of the world, and hopefully someday as well, also the VKontakts and the WeChats and the international companies that are now all playing roles in our online media ecosystems. But until you engage with content moderation with private companies as well as the public sector, you're gonna run into challenges in terms of how you regulate this kind of hate speech. So I think some of those codes and those instruments that the European Union are working to develop are some good solutions that hopefully will get to the problems in a more comprehensive way.
Indeed. Thank you very much. It is one of the hot potatoes on the agenda, and so hopefully this European Commission with the other legislative bodies will deliver on this commitment as part of its gender equality agenda and the work program that was also adopted to support higher female participation in politics. To complete this beautiful session, I'm so grateful for all your shares. I feel that we really covered the breadth and depth of the issue to a very big extent. For those of you who are with us on Slido, I would like to ask you to share with us what's your main takeaway. Hello, Secretariat. We heard you for a second. For those of you who have the Slido open, in case you joined us a bit later, the hashtag to open the right Slido room is Women's Day COR. Yes, you will also see it on the screen to type the right spelling of the code. And we'd be grateful if you would let us know what is your main takeaway. We're wondering if it's more on the fear side or on the actionability side. What are you taking away as your main message? As you're leaving this session, I feel we've had some powerful shares there. And while you're doing that, we can already start setting up for the next and the final session of today's conference, where we will have two amazing role models addressing their own personal experience with hate speech online and how they're dealing with all kinds of negative pressures and harassment on social media and in the online space. We know what's the business case behind gender equality and diversity in politics. We know how challenging it can be for female candidates. And so now, as we've already mentioned in the previous session, the question is how to bring it under one umbrella of legislative policy and other tools to support. And so without further ado, I would like to hand over to Samira Rafaela, who's a member of the European Parliament for the Netherlands, part of the Renew Group, member of the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality, who will share with us her own personal journey of getting involved with politics, the mission to combat social and economic inequalities, and her personal story of dealing with the challenges that the online space poses for a female politician. Samira, good to have you with us.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for the introduction and for this great and very important event. It's a special day to all of us, to men and women, because these are the days that we need to answer these very crucial questions: how to reach gender equality, better women's rights in the world. But I always say every day must be Women's Day. So thank you again. And this day comes at a crucial time. It comes at a time where the need for more women in politics could be more urgent. So we find ourselves in an unprecedented crisis, facing challenges we could have never foreseen. But if one thing has become clear from this crisis, it is that women are the most vulnerable to its detrimental consequences. And a spike in the cases of domestic violence, job losses, and the burden of unpaid care at home all fell on the shoulders of women and girls. We could see that during the crisis. And it is therefore so problematic that the response to this crisis is led by male-dominated administrations. Most governments have failed to apply a gender lens and have been slow to respond to specific challenges faced by women. And of 150 national dedicated COVID-19 task forces in 87 countries, 85% are made up of men, 11.4% comprise mainly women, and only 3.5% have gender parity. Lack of representation is one symptom of a dysfunctional system where decisions are made by a small minority. The lack of women in decision making is problematic for a multitude of reasons, but primarily because the solutions offered are not inclusive of gender, ethnicity, and sexual orientation, and ultimately exclude those who offer unique perspective and expertise. We need to change the position of women from the political margin to the mainstream. And I want to use this opportunity today to call on every girl and woman in the audience to fight for this chance. And it was only 2 years ago when I decided to enter the political arena and candidate myself for the European Parliament elections. And I must admit, it's not always easy to take the step towards politics. The political arena remains an establishment where people with power aim to protect their own norms and identity. And if you don't necessarily conform to this norm, it means you will be challenged and not accepted instantly. I have experienced myself that entering the European Parliament as a woman of color comes with certain challenges, like underestimation and prejudices. And in general, women have to justify the way they dress, the way they speak, more than their male counterparts do. I can guarantee you that. So coming into an arena where you see so little resemblance of yourself can be discomforting. And for me, it was a wake-up call. From that moment, I knew I wanted to change the status quo and break the establishment from within. An extra challenge that women face in today's politics is that the public debate has shifted to an online environment where people can spread their hate anonymously. Women who dare to speak publicly and dare to challenge the norms are answered with a wave of hate and sexist comments. And I am glad to see this event also discuss the challenges that come with the new digital reality. And despite all these challenges, I do not want you to feel discouraged to step into the world of politics. We need more women and girls to fight these gender norms in order to pave the way for future generations. We need to show them it's possible and that they have the right to be there. Today's International Women's Day theme is Choose to Challenge. The political arena is ultimately also the place where you can choose to challenge, make a true change, and realize your ambitions. For me, the reason to enter politics was to combat existing social inequalities and injustices. And my own experiences with discrimination and exclusion have strengthened me in my mission to fight for social justice. But social and economic equality can only be achieved if we include a multiplicity of perspectives in the way we tackle today's problem. Diversity in perspectives can provide adequate solutions to diverse challenges people face in society. And diversity is a powerful instrument. More diversity in politics is not only beneficial for female politicians who are elected, it can also greatly function as a role model effect on the next generation. And young women must be able to create images of relatable individuals whose success seems attainable. The recent election of Kamala Harris as Vice President of the United States proves to all women and girls over the world that hard work pays off and that there are no limits to what women can achieve. And as our world quickly expands, challenges like climate change and this pandemic have become more global, calling for a growing necessity to provide diverse and multicultural solutions. Speaking about why diversity matters so much does not imply that our European institutions are doing so well in this matter. In fact, there is still much to gain when it comes to diversity in the EU institutions. But how can we, as European decision makers, preach that diversity is so important if our own EU institutions lack true diversity? Ambitions and plans are not enough. What is necessary is a true realization that a diverse workforce adds value to the quality of decisions. And I want women to keep believing that. You have the right to be there and you have the right to be part of it. But often the changes do not go by itself. We cannot just sit back and wait for things to be equal. Let me remind you of the gloomy statistic that no single country in the world is set to achieve gender equality by 2030. And as European policymakers, we must set the right example. We have implemented numerous laws and plans, but they do need to work. They do need to work for women, for girls, and the most vulnerable in the European Union. Parity is powerful, and the time is now for policymakers and business leaders to step up and make it a reality. But equal representation requires action from all of us, women and men too. And I would like to conclude by calling you to be part of the solution. Have the courage, despite the challenges you might face, to speak out and be open on your ambitions and the goals you need to achieve. Ask yourself questions and the things you wish to see differently in society. Have the courage to combat sexism and do not let it bring you down. Only if we speak out collectively against hate against women, we can overcome prejudices, biases, and break out of the traditional gender roles. And finally, have the courage to enter politics. It is the place where you can choose to challenge the status quo and fight for what is important to you. The possibilities are endless, but mainly it is the place for you because you belong there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who are inspired by Samira's words and would like to bring more women and more gender equality to the European Parliament, it's important to realize that the time is flying really fast. And while we think that the elections were here really recently, the next elections is 2024. And we often see that the political parties wake up to the gender equality cause or gender equality priority for their ballot lists too late. So if we think of 2024 elections, it's really the time is now for the political parties and communities to wake up to the need to identify political potentials really in the female communities that they have around themselves and start working with those talented women who would be willing to consider the political engagement so that they are ready to start building the campaigns when the time is right for the next election. So it's a little bit of a food for thought for those of you listening to us. How can you get involved with the talented women around you or yourselves in order to bring the talent that you have and the voice to the European politics? And obviously, this also applies for the Committee of Regions. And our next and final speaker of today is Jasna Gabric, who's a member of the European Committee of the Regions for Renew Group, Slovenia. And she will also kindly share her story of getting involved with politics, what is the shadow side for political candidates, and whether a quota for women political candidates can actually help sort out part of the disbalance in countries like Slovenia. Thank you, and very good to have you with us as the final speaker for today.
Thank you, dear Lucia. You hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, dear Lucia, dear guests in audience, especially happy International Women's Day to all women in audience. And nice hello from Slovenia. Yeah, it's hard to be the last one as a speaker because probably all are already a little bit tired, but I will try to be more colorful. That's why I presented and prepared PowerPoint, so I hope I can share it. I will speak and show how my path in politics started because I entered when I was 25. Now I'm not that much older, but anyway. So this is my presentation, just a minute. You see it, right? So how it all started, I was 25 and I'm living in a city where there was quite really high unemployment rate. I had a question, should I stay now here or I just move out? The city, we were really a big mining city for over 200 years with heavy industry. So a lot of people were just walking out, moving away, especially the youth. So I was just thinking I can be one of them or it's time to do something. So it was just coincident that I entered to Slovenian, local politics. I never dreamed about it. I never thought about it. It just happened because I was quite active as a student. I was also a president of student club. I was working on a local radio station. And there, when I had the shows and events, I met an older lady who was a member of city council, and she asked me if I want to join them. I was thinking about that, and then I decided, okay, I said to myself, I had only two conditions. The first one is that I don't want to be and sign into their political party. And the second was that if I enter to the city council, that please don't put me your word to my mouth so I can say what I think it's right. And I have discussions about topics that I feel they should be discussed. And she said, okay, no problem. So we went to elections. There were elections. When I was 25, I entered to the city council. And after 2 years, in the middle of the mandate, I became a deputy mayor because the mayor was just without any deputy mayors because two ladies before me just went to the other jobs and building their careers. So I said, okay, why not? I entered and I said, maybe I can change something. And I had 2 years of mandate of deputy mayor. So I saw a lot of things. I saw what is happening. And I just said to myself, I don't want to live in that kind of a city. So either I stay, but probably not, or do something, or I just leave the city as some of my colleagues. So yes, I went there for the elections to run for a mayor's office in 2014 when I was 29 years old. And you know, it's hard to be a woman in the men's world. The politics are the men's world still. And being a young woman, it's even harder. So in Slovenia, there were gender quotas on candidates lists since 2006. And I have to say that this helps a lot, especially for the women. As I wrote there, Slovenia ranked above the EU average with a share of women above 30%, but from 2008, we again fell below the EU average. And in 2020, you see there the numbers. And about the mayors, in 2014, when I was elected for the first time, there were only 16 women mayors out of 212 cities. And 4 years later, when I got the second mandate, okay, the number it's higher a bit, but not much. It's 22 women out of 212. So this is still not a huge number. And my political path in Slovenia, as I said it before, it started in 2010. I became the member of municipal council and a member of committee of the regions, one of the youngest. And at the age 27, deputy mayor, and then at the age 29, a mayor. And then at the age 33, so in 2018, I won the second mandate. But it was not that easy. So when I decided to go and run for the mayor's office, it's crazy, right? At 29 and being a woman, they all said it won't go through it and you'll see you won't win. But I said, let's do it and let's try it. With my friends, we established a team. And we had then promotions. I mean, I'm sure that half of the result is because of the social medias, because of the Facebook. I use it a lot just to say my things, what I had to say, because you can't get to media, because you're not important for them. And the other thing is that we did it all by ourselves. You see, this is my first poster. My friend took a photo. My other friend did the design. So everything we did by ourselves. I didn't have any political party behind me. And there was 5 male candidates. They all had a strong political background and parties. But we did it. So I became a mayor for the first mandate. But then it's already started the hard work because everywhere I went, I said, oh, hi, I'm Jasna Gabric, I'm the mayor. You could see their faces. That was the funniest thing. They were just like, oh, really, you are the mayor? And I said, yes. And the hard work started because the difference between being a male or female mayor is that you have to do, I think, twice more than a male. And I'm sorry because I have to say that. You feel also like you don't belong to the group of politics. You hear some comments, but don't listen to them. Just go to your goals and do what you think is right. I think that the most important problems that the female face is in politics, the lack of money, fundraising when you go and run for elections, imposter syndrome. So when individuals doubt their skills, talents, and lack of time, because usually you have family and you have to take for the children. But I didn't have any family, so it was a bit easier, the first mandate. But I saw that I had to work like, you have 3 pictures down there. I always work like this. I took a picture how it is, then we showed to the public what we want to do, and the third picture is how it is today and what we made it. And I did that for everything that we did. So the arguments of the males who were saying, oh, what she can do and stuff, they just flourish because when you go with the arguments, when you do what you think is right and you show the results, then they don't have anything to say anymore. And this is already my second poster, just to see how we did it. I hope I didn't change a lot, but anyway, there's a lot of hard work. And if I have to say, what are the advantages of the female, the women in politics are immediacy, perseverance, sensibility, honesty, steadfastness, standing for human rights, maybe less corruption, as I noticed, and that's it. And yes, I have to prove myself all the time. That's always on the schedule. And this is how I did it. So when I ran for the first time and the second time, I just write down there, you see, with these marks, what we want to do. And the thing is, it's not hard just to win. You have to do what you promised. Because when you will run for the second mandate, you will be more out there. Everybody will be watching you, and everybody will just saying, did you do what you said or you didn't? So I really went from point to point, and we did almost everything that we promised. And this is my team for the second mandate, where I wrote, this is the best team for the city council. So don't give up. I'm always a lot out there. You have to feel people, like listen to them, what they have to say, and then do it. Because most of the politicians, and I don't want to be rude, but most of them are just listening. They say, yes, I agree, but not then doing what they promised. So if you do that and you listen to them, and if you're there out there with them all the time, then it's no problem to win then the second mandate, or maybe even the third and fourth. So these are just some pictures of our work. And I'm always saying, with perseverance, with hard work, we are changing society and their perception. And I think we are on a good way to make it so that one day maybe there won't be any gender quotas. Thank you for listening, and that was all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these inspiring words. It's really very enlightening and inspiring to hear how through the hard work and lightness that you can bring to it, and fact-based policy making, you can actually bring in the new culture of leadership without trying to push through and doing it the male way, as many of you were mentioning today, that it's not just about the participation, but it's also about the bringing in the new style of communication and leading the game through the feminine values. So thank you very much for that. We have time for questions. So I'm wondering if in the meantime, for those of you who are still with us, if you would like to share how it resonated, what are your main takeaways, what are you going to take as actions? I'm wondering if there are any inspiring politicians among us or any activists who would like to contribute with their nugget and their way of contributing other candidates. Is there anybody brave enough who would like to come on camera with us, or otherwise just type in the chat? I'm sure that also thanks to today's event and all the events that are happening this week, all of us will be even more committed ambassadors for the cause, and it's important to get connected like this and identify the role models and the best practices that are in the European space, so we can create even more buzz about the need to empower more women to get politically involved. Anybody courageous to share? Any questions? You can also raise hand to ask for the floor in the tool if you want. Now I'm looking in my users list. I don't see anybody asking for the floor. Maybe you're just thinking about all this inspiration that you've heard today. What I would really like to hear, I mean, it's a bit hard if we don't see our audience, but if we were in a room together, I would be asking you, what is the date that you have in mind? What are the upcoming elections that are most relevant in the space that you're active in, be it local, regional, national, or even European? What are the elections where it really matters to you to see more professional women involved in politics? And once you have the date in mind, what is the name? What is the woman that you would like to support? Be it yourself, or be it somebody in your circle who you see could be an active politician or is already thinking about running and is looking for the right tribe to support her. And then once you have the name in mind, what is the one thing that you can do to support her? Because as we've heard today, the women can't do it on their own, disregarding of how strong they are within. They need a tribe, they need connections, they need funding, they need help with creating a more positive vibe under their social media posts. So maybe that would be my suggestion for one takeaway today. What is the one date for elections coming up? Who is the one woman that you are ready to support, and what is the one thing that you are ready to offer them in order to make her next race successful and easier and more pleasant? Unless I'm quickly looking, I don't think there's any questions coming up unless I'm mistaken. Beautiful quotes in the chat. Thank you all for your engagement. Also, a side note, the presentations and the recording will be available on the website of the Committee of Regions. So just go to the events page for More Women in Politics and you will find all materials there. Don't hesitate to share it with all the talented women around you so that it serves the purpose beyond today's conversation. So thank you very much once again, and we'll be looking forward to meeting on another occasions or in the electoral rooms. Have a nice rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.